Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Tonight I've got some absolutely wild Reddit stories for you. Alright, let's jump into the first story. So this whole thing started about 6 months before my cousin's wedding. I need to set the scene here because context matters. My cousin Sarah and I grew up really close. We're talking sleepovers every weekend, sharing clothes, telling each other everything kinda close. When she got engaged to her boyfriend of 4 years, I was genuinely thrilled for her. She asked me to be a bridesmaid, and I immediately said yes. The first red flag should have been when she sent the bridesmaid dress options. There were 3 choices, and they were all, how do I put this nicely? Absolutely hideous. I'm talking neon lime green, ruffles in places ruffles shouldn't be, and a price tag of $800. $800 for a dress I would wear once and then immediately donate, because no human being should be seen in public wearing that. But okay. I'm a team player. I voted for the least offensive option, which was a pale yellow dress that made everyone look vaguely jaundiced, but at least it didn't have ruffles. The other bridesmaids and I all agreed on it. Sarah, however, decided to go with the lime green monstrosity because it was fun and memorable. She wasn't wrong about memorable. Fast forward to 2 months before the wedding. Sarah calls me in tears, saying the wedding planner quit. Just straight up quit. No explanation, just sent an email that said something like, I can no longer continue with this project. Best of luck. That should have been red flag number 2, but I'm apparently blind to warning signs. Sarah begs me to help coordinate things since I'd planned a few work events before. I should have said no. I really should have said no. But she's family, she's crying, and I'm an idiot, so I said yes. This is where my life became a living nightmare. The wedding was planned for a beach venue. Sounds nice, right? Romantic sunset, sand between your toes, waves crashing in the background. Except Sarah decided she wanted a full sit-down dinner with china plates and crystal glasses on the beach, on sand, where wind exists. The venue coordinator tried to explain this was a terrible idea, but Sarah insisted it would be elegant and unique. I spent weeks trying to make this work. I called rental companies. I researched ways to stabilize tables on sand. I even looked into those weighted tablecloths they use at outdoor events. Everything was either too expensive or wouldn't work with the specific aesthetic Sarah wanted. She wanted white tablecloths, white china, crystal everything. I tried explaining that one gust of wind would turn her elegant dinner into a scene from a disaster movie, but she wouldn't budge. Then came the menu drama. Sarah is vegan, which is totally fine. Her fiancé is not vegan. Most of their families are not vegan, but Sarah decided the entire wedding would be vegan because it was her day, and everyone should respect her lifestyle choices. Again, I'm all for vegan food. I've had some incredible vegan meals, but Sarah's idea of a wedding menu was plain lettuce salad, unseasoned roasted vegetables, and dry quinoa. No sauce, no seasoning, nothing. When I suggested maybe adding some flavor or at least offering a non-vegan option, she accused me of not supporting her. The guest list was another disaster. Sarah wanted to invite 200 people to a venue that comfortably held 120. When I pointed this out, she said people could stand or mingle, and that not everyone would show up anyway. I tried explaining that you can't plan a wedding assuming half your guests won't come, but she called me negative and unsupportive. 3 weeks before the wedding, the florist calls me. Apparently, Sarah had been messaging her constantly, changing the flower arrangements every few days, demanding rare flowers that weren't in season, and refusing to pay the deposit. The florist was ready to back out. I ended up spending 2 hours on the phone, mediating the situation, eventually convincing the florist to stay on with a simplified arrangement and getting Sarah to agree to pay the deposit. 2 weeks before the wedding, the DJ cancels. Sarah had sent him a playlist of 12 hours of meditation music and whale sounds. 12 hours for a 4-hour reception. When the DJ suggested maybe mixing in some actual dance music, Sarah told him he was ruining her vision and fired him. Finding a new DJ 2 weeks before a wedding is basically impossible, but I somehow managed it. The new DJ was 3 times the original price, which Sarah complained about endlessly. 1 week before the wedding, I got a call at 2 in the morning. It was Sarah, sobbing because she'd seen the weather forecast. There was a 30% chance of rain on her wedding day. Not a guarantee, just a possibility. She wanted to move the wedding indoors. The indoor backup venue was already booked. I spent the entire next day calling every venue within 50 miles, trying to find an alternative. Nothing. Sarah blamed me for not booking an indoor backup months ago, even though she'd specifically said she didn't want one because it wouldn't rain on her perfect day. The day before the wedding, I arrived at the venue to help set up. The tables were being set up on the beach, just like Sarah wanted. It took 6 hours because the rental company had to figure out how to stabilize everything on sand. The tablecloths kept blowing away. The crystal glasses looked beautiful for about 10 minutes before getting covered in sand. The white china showed every grain. It was exactly as disastrous as everyone had predicted. Sarah showed up during setup and had a complete meltdown because the tables weren't positioned symmetrically enough. We were on a beach. The ground was uneven. There was no way to make everything perfectly symmetrical. She insisted we move every single table. It took another 3 hours. By the time we finished, it was dark. Everyone was exhausted, and I was seriously questioning my life choices. The wedding day started with Sarah calling me at 6 in the morning. She couldn't find her shoes. Her wedding shoes that she'd packed in a specific bag were somehow missing. I drove to 4 different stores, trying to find white satin heels in her size. I finally found a pair at the 5th store, paid for them myself because Sarah had already spent too much on the wedding and rushed them to her. The ceremony was supposed to start at 4. At 3:30, the officiant hadn't arrived. Turns out Sarah had written him a 30-page document of ceremony instructions, including specific pauses, tones of voice, and even how he should stand. He'd read it, panicked, and considered not showing up. I had to call him and basically beg him to come, promising that he could just do a standard ceremony and Sarah wouldn't even notice. The ceremony finally started at 4:45. Sarah walked down the aisle to a recording of whale sounds. Her choice, not mine. The bridesmaids were all in our lime green dresses, looking like a row of neon highlighters. The ceremony itself was fine, actually kind of nice once it got going. Sarah and her fiancé wrote their own vows, which were genuinely sweet. For about 20 minutes, I thought maybe everything would be okay. Then came the reception. The wind picked up right as dinner was being served. Tablecloths started flapping, napkins flew away, glasses tipped over. The unseasoned vegetables looked even less appetizing covered in sand. Guests were trying to be polite, but I could see people sneaking away to find actual food. The quinoa was so dry that people were coughing. Someone's aunt asked me if there was a local restaurant nearby. The first dance was to more whale sounds. I'm not kidding, Sarah had insisted on it. Her new husband looked mortified, but went along with it. About 30 seconds in, a particularly strong gust of wind knocked over 3 tables. Crystal glasses shattered. Food went everywhere. Guests scattered. Sarah started crying. Not delicate tears, full-on sobbing. She ran off the dance floor and locked herself in the venue's bathroom. Her husband followed, trying to console her. Meanwhile, I was left trying to coordinate cleanup, while also making sure guests weren't injured by flying china. The DJ, bless him, tried to salvage the situation by playing actual music. Some guests started dancing, trying to make the best of things, but Sarah emerged from the bathroom and screamed at him to stop, insisting we stick to her meditation playlist. Half the guests left within the next hour. By 9 o'clock, the wedding was essentially over. The venue that was supposed to be rented until midnight was empty except for the bridal party and some very uncomfortable family members. Sarah sat at the head table, still crying, while her husband tried to comfort her. I spent the next 3 hours supervising cleanup. The next day, Sarah called me. I expected maybe a thank you, or an acknowledgement of how much work I'd put in. Instead, she told me I'd ruined her wedding. I'd ruined it by not preventing the wind, by not making the food better, by not keeping guests entertained, by not predicting every single problem. She said I was a terrible bridesmaid and a worse cousin. I hung up on her. I'd spent months of my life, thousands of dollars of my own money, and countless hours of stress trying to make her vision work. And her response was to blame me for things completely outside my control. I haven't spoken to her since. Some family members think I should apologize. I think I should send her a bill. Let me tell you about my neighbor, who I'm going to call Derek, because that's his actual name, and I honestly don't care if he somehow finds this story. Derek moved in next door about 8 months ago, and from day one, he made it clear that he believed parking rules didn't apply to him. I live in a townhouse complex with assigned parking spots. Each unit gets 2 spots, clearly marked with the unit number. My spots are directly in front of my door, marked with a big number 12. Derek's spots are 4 spaces down, marked with number 17. Simple system, impossible to misunderstand. On Derek's first day, he parked in one of my spots. I figured it was an honest mistake. New place, maybe he didn't see the numbers. I knocked on his door politely and explained. He looked at me like I'd just asked him to donate a kidney, sighed dramatically, and said he'd move it later. Later turned out to be 3 days later when I left a note on his windshield. That should have been the end of it. It was not the end of it. Derek decided that my parking spots were somehow communal property. He'd park there whenever his friends came over. He'd park there when he didn't feel like walking the extra 15 feet to his actual spots. He'd park there, leave for hours, and act shocked when I asked him to move. I tried being nice. I tried being firm. I tried leaving notes. I talked to him at least a dozen times. His response was always the same. What's the big deal? There are other spots. Yes, there are other spots. They're across the parking lot, nowhere near my door, and they're not assigned to me. I pay for my spots specifically, so I don't have to haul groceries 50 yards. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon. I've been grocery shopping, bought way too much because I was hungry while shopping, and came home to find both of my spots occupied. One by Derek's car, one by his friend's truck. I had 6 bags of groceries, including ice cream that was rapidly melting, and nowhere to park except the visitor spots at the far end of the complex. I called Derek. No answer. I knocked on his door. No answer. I could hear people inside, music playing, clearly home, but ignoring me. I ended up parking in the visitor spot, carrying all 6 bags in one trip because I was too angry to make multiple trips, and watching my ice cream melt into soup. That evening, I decided I was done being nice. I'd been patient, I'd been understanding, and Derek had interpreted that as permission to walk all over me. So I made a plan, a beautiful, petty, absolutely satisfying plan. First, I did some research. I found out that our townhouse complex has a towing company on contract. Any car parked in someone else's assigned spot can be towed at the owner's expense. I've been avoiding this option because it seemed extreme, but Derek had made his choice. I waited for the next time Derek parked in my spot. Didn't take long. 2 days later, there was his car, casually taking up my spot like he owned it. I took photos from multiple angles, showing both his license plate and my clearly marked spot number. Then I called the towing company. They arrived within 40 minutes. The truck pulled up. The driver confirmed the situation, and they hooked up Derek's car. I watched from my window, and I'm not going to lie, it was the most satisfying thing I'd seen in months. The tow truck drove away with Derek's car just as Derek came running out of his townhouse in sweatpants and house slippers, yelling and waving his arms. He ran over to me, absolutely furious. Started yelling about how I should have knocked on his door first, how this was an overreaction, how I was a terrible neighbor. I very calmly pointed out that I had asked him nicely at least 15 times, that these were my assigned spots, and that he'd had months to learn basic parking etiquette. Then I went inside and closed the door. Derek had to pay $350 to get his car back from the impound lot. I know this because he came to my door the next day to yell about it. I told him if he parked in my spot again, I'd have him towed again. He called me several creative names and stormed off. For about a week, Derek parked in his own spots. I thought maybe he'd finally learned, but no. Derek is apparently incapable of learning from consequences. A week and a half later, there was his car again, right in my spot. I didn't even hesitate. I took photos and called the tow company. Second time, cost him the same $350. After the second towing, Derek tried a different approach. He went to the homeowners association and complained about me, said I was harassing him, that I was being unreasonable, that parking should be first come, first serve. The HOA president called me to discuss the situation. I explained everything, showed them my documentation of every time I'd asked Derek to move, showed them the complex parking rules that clearly state assigned parking. The HOA president sighed and said Derek had already been warned about parking violations by previous neighbors in his old spot. Turns out Derek has a history of this. His previous neighbors had also complained about his parking. The HOA sent Derek a formal warning letter stating that any further parking violations would result in fines. I thought this might actually solve the problem. Derek parked in my spot again 3 days later. Third towing, another $350 for Derek, plus a $200 fine from the HOA. That's $550 for one parking violation. I was starting to feel like this was becoming expensive for him, and I was completely okay with that. After the third towing and the HOA fine, Derek tried yet another approach. He started parking just barely on the line between his spot and the adjacent, unmarked area, in a way that technically wasn't in my spot, but made it nearly impossible for me to park in mine. His car would be at such an angle that I couldn't open my driver's side door. I took photos of this too, sent them to the HOA. They measured the parking job and determined that his car was still in violation because it was blocking access to my spot. Another fine for Derek, $250 this time. Derek's girlfriend, who I'd seen around but never spoken to, approached me one afternoon. She seemed embarrassed and apologized for Derek's behavior. She said she'd been telling him to just park in his own spots, but he was stubborn and didn't like being told what to do. I appreciated her apology, but I pointed out that being stubborn doesn't exempt you from rules. She agreed and said she was actually considering breaking up with him over this and other issues. I said that seemed wise. At this point, Derek had spent over $1,000 on towings and HOA fines, all because he refused to park in his own assigned spots. You'd think that would be enough to change his behavior. You'd think. Let's dive into the next story. I'm 23 years old now, but this story starts when I was 17 and about to graduate high school. I need to give some background about my family situation because it's relevant to understanding how badly my mother screwed me over. My dad died when I was 12. Heart attack, completely unexpected, devastating for everyone. He was a good man, worked hard, loved his family, and was smart enough to have life insurance. When he passed, my mom received a pretty substantial payout. Part of that money was specifically designated for my college education. My dad had always talked about how important education was and how he wanted to make sure I could go to any school I got into without worrying about money. The life insurance payout was around $400,000 total. $200,000 was supposed to be for household expenses and my mom's future. The other $200,000 was supposed to be my college fund, kept in a separate account that my mom managed until I turned 18. My dad had set it up this way in his will, with the expectation that my mom would honor his wishes. For years, everything seemed fine. My mom would occasionally mention the college fund, reassuring me that it was safe and growing with interest. She'd talk about how proud my dad would be that I was doing well in school. When I got accepted to a good university with a partial scholarship, she seemed genuinely happy for me. I thought everything was on track. The summer before college, I asked my mom about accessing the college fund. I needed to pay the first semester's tuition and housing, which even with the scholarship was about $25,000. My mom got weird about it. She kept saying we'd talk about it later, or handle it soon. I didn't think much of it at first. She'd been handling finances since my dad died, and I trusted her. 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave for college, I sat my mom down and insisted we discuss the money. I needed to pay tuition, or I'd lose my spot. That's when she finally admitted the truth. The college fund was gone. All of it, $200,000, completely spent. I couldn't process it at first. I asked her to explain, thinking maybe she'd invested it somewhere, and it was temporarily inaccessible. No, she'd spent it. Over the course of 5 years, she gradually drained the entire account. New car, home renovations, vacations, designer clothes, expensive dinners, a timeshare in Florida. She'd been living way beyond her means and using my college fund to finance her lifestyle. I was completely shocked. I asked her how she could do this, how she could spend money that was specifically meant for my education, money that my dad had died to provide for me. Her response was that she was my mother, and she'd sacrificed so much, raising me alone, so she deserved to use the money as she saw fit. She actually said that she deserved my college fund because being a single parent was hard. I pointed out that she still had the other $200,000 for herself. She admitted she'd spent most of that too. In 5 years, she'd burned through nearly $400,000 and had nothing to show for it except material possessions and debt. She'd taken out credit cards in my name without my knowledge and maxed those out too. I was 18 years old with $15,000 in credit card debt I didn't even know existed. I had 2 weeks to figure out how to pay for college. My scholarship covered about half of tuition, but I still needed money for the rest of tuition, housing, meal plan, books, everything. I applied for every loan I could find. I maxed out federal student loans, which weren't enough. I applied for private loans, but with the credit card debt my mom had created in my name, I kept getting denied or offered terrible interest rates. I ended up having to defer my enrollment for a semester. I got a job, worked 60 hours a week, saved every penny. I hired a lawyer with what little money I had and took my mom to court. The lawyer said I had a strong case, since the money was specifically designated in my dad's will for my education. But lawsuits take time. My mom fought me on it, claimed the money was hers to use as she wanted, claimed I was an ungrateful child. She got family members involved, telling them I was suing her over a misunderstanding and painting herself as the victim. Half the family took her side without even asking for my perspective. Family gatherings became nightmares. Relatives who'd known me since birth called me selfish and greedy for attacking my grieving mother. The case took 8 months. During that time, I worked constantly, saved money, and tried to repair the credit damage my mom had caused. I had to file police reports for identity theft for the credit cards she'd opened in my name. That was surreal, filing reports against my own mother. The credit card companies eventually forgave most of the debt once they saw the documentation, but my credit was still destroyed. When the case finally went to court, the judge was not sympathetic to my mother. The will was clear. The money was designated for education, and my mom had deliberately spent it on personal luxuries. The judge ordered her to repay the full $200,000 plus interest. My mom obviously didn't have that kind of money anymore. The judge set up a payment plan and put a lien on the house. My mom had to sell the house I grew up in, the house my dad had bought, the house where I had every childhood memory. She downsized to a small apartment and had to get a job after years of living off my dad's life insurance. She was bitter about it, blamed me for ruining her life, and we stopped speaking. I finally started college at 19, a year late, with a combination of loans and the money from the lawsuit that was slowly being repaid. It wasn't the experience I'd imagined. While my classmates were worrying about normal college stuff, I was working part-time jobs and stressing about whether my mom's payments would come through each month. The lawsuit money came in slowly. My mom would sometimes miss payments, claiming she couldn't afford them, forcing me to go back to court to enforce the judgment. Every semester was a financial nightmare, trying to piece together enough money from loans, work, the partial scholarship, and the inconsistent lawsuit payments. I graduated last year, 4 years late, because I had to take lighter course loads while working. I have about $90,000 in student loan debt. My mom still owes me around $70,000 from the original judgment. Her payment plan has another 6 years on it. assuming she doesn't miss more payments. We haven't spoken in over 5 years now. Some family members have tried to reconcile us, suggesting I should forgive her because she's still your mother, and family is important. They don't seem to understand that she didn't just spend money. She spent my future. She spent something my dad died trying to secure for me. She chose designer handbags and vacations over my education, over my dad's final wishes for me. I'm doing okay now. I have a decent job. I'm making loan payments, and I'm slowly building my life. But I lost years of my life and opportunities because my mother decided her comfort was more important than my future. I lost relationships with family members who took her side. I lost the ability to trust easily, and I lost the house where my dad's memory lived. People ask me if I'll ever forgive her. Maybe someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or allowing her back into my life. She made her choices, and those choices have consequences. I just wish someone had been monitoring that account, or that my dad had set it up differently, or that I'd known to check on it sooner. But I was a kid who trusted his mother, and she exploited that trust in the worst possible way. Let's move on to the next story. This is one of those stories that starts with a small mistake and snowballs into a month of absolute humiliation. I was 21 and had just gotten my first real job after college. It was at a corporate office for a medium-sized logistics company. Nothing glamorous, entry-level analyst position, but it paid well and had benefits. I was excited to start my professional life. The job offer email included an attachment labeled Employee Handbook and Dress Code. I downloaded it, skimmed through it quickly, and noted that the dress code was business casual. The document had several pages about what business casual meant: slacks or khakis, button-down shirts, closed-toe shoes, no jeans, no t-shirts, nothing too casual, but also not suits every day. Pretty standard office attire. I went shopping and bought a bunch of appropriate clothes. What I didn't realize was that there was a second attachment I'd completely missed. The email had 2 attachments, and I'd only opened one. The second attachment was labeled New Employee Orientation Schedule, and buried in that document was a note that during the first 90 days, new employees in my specific department were required to wear a different dress code as part of a training program. We were supposed to wear business professional, meaning full suits, ties, the whole deal. I showed up on my first day in khakis and a button-down shirt, no tie, no jacket. I thought I looked perfectly professional. I walked into the office and immediately noticed that everyone else was in full suits. I figured maybe Mondays were more formal or something. Nobody said anything to me, so I didn't worry about it. Day 2, everyone was in suits again. I was still in khakis and a button-down. A coworker asked me if I was feeling okay, which I thought was a weird question, but I said yes. She gave me a strange look and walked away. I still didn't put it together. By day 3, I was starting to feel underdressed, but I'd already worn all my business casual clothes and didn't have any suits. I figured I'd buy some over the weekend. But then Thursday happened, and I overheard 2 coworkers talking near the coffee machine. One said something like, "I don't know what he's thinking with the dress code thing. Is he trying to make some kind of statement?" I realized they were talking about me. I walked over and asked what they meant. They looked uncomfortable and explained that new employees were supposed to wear business professional for the first 90 days. It was in the orientation packet. I felt my stomach drop. I told them I'd only seen the regular dress code, not anything about a 90-day requirement. They looked skeptical, like I was making excuses. I went home that night and frantically searched through my emails. That's when I found the second attachment I'd completely missed. Sure enough, there it was. New employees in the analysis department must adhere to business professional dress code for the first 90 days as part of the corporate training program. I'd been violating the dress code for 4 days straight. I went out that evening and bought 2 cheap suits. They weren't great quality, but they were all I could afford on short notice. I showed up on Friday in one of the suits, feeling relieved that I'd finally figured it out. Except now I had a new problem. Everyone thought I'd been deliberately ignoring the dress code all week. My supervisor called me into her office. She asked why I'd been dressing casually when the dress code was clearly stated in the orientation materials. I explained the honest truth. I'd missed the second attachment, didn't know about the 90-day requirement, and had corrected it as soon as I found out. She didn't believe me. She said it was hard to imagine that someone could miss something so important and suggested that maybe I wasn't detail-oriented enough for the position. That stung. My entire job was supposed to be analyzing data and paying attention to details, and I'd started by missing a crucial detail about what to wear. My supervisor said she'd let it slide this time, but that I was starting off on the wrong foot. I apologized profusely and promised it wouldn't happen again, but the damage was done. Word had spread around the office that the new guy had shown up in casual clothes for a week, either because he couldn't read or because he thought he was too cool for the dress code. Neither interpretation was good. Co-workers treated me differently. Some were cold, some seemed to pity me. Some made little comments about making sure to read all the emails. The worst part was that I had to wear these cheap suits every day. They didn't fit great, they weren't comfortable, and they looked obviously cheap compared to everyone else's tailored suits. I felt like I was walking around with a sign that said, "I screwed up, and now I'm overcompensating." Around week 2, another new employee started. Her name was Jennifer, and she showed up on her first day in a perfect suit, clearly having read all the orientation materials. My supervisor made a point of complimenting her in front of me, saying something like, "It's so nice when new employees take the dress code seriously from day one." I wanted to sink into the floor. Jennifer and I became friends eventually, and she admitted that my supervisor had specifically told her about my dress code incident as a cautionary tale. Apparently, I'd become the example of what not to do. The guy who couldn't follow simple instructions. The guy who showed up to a corporate job in khakis when everyone else was in suits. The 90 days dragged on. I wore my cheap suits, did my work, and tried to prove that I was actually competent despite the rough start. My work was good. I consistently met deadlines, my analysis was accurate, and I started getting positive feedback on my actual job performance. But the dress code thing hung over me like a cloud. Around day 60, we had a department meeting. My supervisor was presenting something, and she made a joke about making sure everyone reads all their emails, while looking directly at me. The whole room laughed. I laughed too, trying to be a good sport, but inside I was dying. It had been 2 months, and she was still making jokes about my mistake. Day 91 was like a liberation. I showed up in business casual, finally allowed to dress like a normal employee. I'd bought some nicer business casual clothes by then, having learned my lesson about reading everything carefully. But even after the 90 days were up, I was still the guy who didn't wear suits his first week. 6 months into the job, a different new employee made a similar mistake. He showed up in jeans and a polo shirt his first day, having completely misread the dress code section. My supervisor was furious with him, sent him home to change, and nearly put him on a formal warning. When I heard about it, I felt a mixture of relief that I wasn't the only one who'd messed up the dress code and sympathy for the guy, because I knew exactly what he was going through. I ended up working at that company for 2 years. I was good at my job, got promoted once, and built decent relationships with most of my coworkers. But in the back of my mind, I was always that guy who wore khakis for a week when he should have been in suits. It became part of my office identity, a story that got told to new employees as a warning. The whole experience taught me to triple-check everything, especially when starting a new job. Read every email twice, open every attachment, ask questions if anything is unclear, and maybe, just maybe, if you're going to make a mistake, make it something other than what you wear to work, because apparently people will never, ever let you forget it. All right, let's get into the next one. I haven't spoken to my father in 8 years. Not a single word, not a text, not an email, nothing. Complete silence. And I don't regret it, even though half my family thinks I'm being unreasonable. Let me explain why I made this choice and why I'm sticking to it. My parents divorced when I was 14. It wasn't a peaceful divorce. It was the kind of divorce where lawyers get involved. where every holiday becomes a negotiation, where kids get caught in the middle. My mom and dad fought constantly about custody, about money, about everything. My younger sister and I were basically pawns in their war against each other. The custody arrangement ended up being 50-50. 1 week with mom, 1 week with dad. It sounds fair on paper, but in practice, it was exhausting. Every week I'd pack up my stuff, move to a different house, adjust to different rules, and then do it all over again. I never felt settled. I never felt like I had a real home. I was always a guest, always temporary. My dad remarried when I was 16. Her name was Vanessa, and she made it clear from day one that she didn't like having stepkids around. She was nice enough when my dad was present, but when he wasn't, she'd make little comments. Things like, "You're so messy," or "Your mother obviously didn't teach you manners," or "I hope you know how lucky you are that your father pays for everything." I tried talking to my dad about it. Multiple times. I'd tell him that Vanessa made me uncomfortable, that she said mean things, that I didn't feel welcome in his house anymore. Every single time, he'd defend her. He'd say I was being too sensitive, that Vanessa was adjusting to being a stepmother, that I needed to give her a chance. He never once took my side. Things got worse when Vanessa got pregnant. Suddenly, all attention shifted to the new baby. My dad became obsessed with being a father again, talking constantly about how excited he was for a fresh start with a new child. That phrasing really hurt. Like my sister and I were failed experiments, and now he was getting another chance to do it right. When my half-brother was born, I was 17. My dad's house became completely centered around the baby. Every conversation was about the baby. Every plan revolved around the baby's schedule. My sister and I were expected to be quiet, helpful, and basically invisible. When we did have time with my dad, he was always exhausted or distracted. My senior year of high school was when things really fell apart. I was applying to colleges, dealing with SATs, managing extracurriculars, all the normal, stressful senior year stuff. I needed support and attention from my parents. My mom was there for me, helping with applications, visiting schools, being present. My dad forgot to show up to my college fair presentation. I'd worked for weeks on a presentation for prospective students. My dad said he'd be there, and he just didn't come. When I called him afterward, he apologized and said the baby had been fussy, and he couldn't leave. That happened multiple times. He missed my final basketball game because the baby was sick. He missed my graduation party because Vanessa needed help with the baby. He showed up late to my actual graduation because the baby's nap schedule was off. Every single important moment of my senior year, my dad was either absent or distracted because of his new family. The breaking point came right before I left for college. I was saying goodbye at my dad's house, and I got emotional. I told him I felt like I'd lost him, like he didn't care about me anymore, like I'd been replaced by his new son. Instead of comforting me or acknowledging my feelings, he got angry. He said I was being selfish, that I couldn't expect him to put his life on hold for me, that I needed to grow up and understand that the world didn't revolve around me. Vanessa was standing right there, and she nodded along with everything he said. Then she added, "Your father has a real family to take care of now." A real family. Like my sister and I weren't real. Like we were just some obligation he had to deal with while his actual family was Vanessa and the baby. I waited for my dad to contradict her, to tell her that was an awful thing to say, to defend me. He didn't. He just stood there, nodding slightly, agreeing with her. That's when I realized he actually felt that way. We weren't his real family anymore. We were leftovers from his first marriage, inconvenient reminders of his past. I left for college the next day and decided I was done. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. When he reached out, I didn't respond. He called a few times in the first month, left voicemails saying we should talk, but there was never an apology, never an acknowledgement that he'd hurt me, just requests that I call him back so we could move past this. My mom asked me about it. My sister asked me about it. I explained what happened, how I felt, why I was choosing to go no contact. My mom understood. My sister was conflicted but supportive. Other family members had opinions. My dad's brother called me and said I was overreacting, that dad loved me and I was being childish. My dad's mother sent me a letter saying that family's forever and I needed to forgive. But here's the thing. Forgiveness requires acknowledgement. You can't forgive someone who doesn't think they did anything wrong. And my dad has never, not once in 8 years, acknowledged that he hurt me. He's never apologized for choosing his new family over me. He's never admitted that Vanessa's comment was cruel, and he should have defended me. Instead, he tells people I'm being difficult, that I won't talk to him over a misunderstanding, that I'm holding a grudge over nothing. He's rewritten the narrative to make himself the victim, and me the villain. And family members who don't know the full story believe him. I graduated college without my dad there. He sent a card with money in it, which I donated. I got my first real job without telling him. I moved to a new city without his input. I've built an entire adult life, and he's not part of it. And I'm okay with that. Actually, I'm more than okay. I'm happier without the constant disappointment and hurt. My sister maintains a relationship with him, which I respect. She says it's complicated, that he's trying to be better, that he asks about me. But she also admits that he still doesn't really understand what he did wrong. He thinks I'm mad because he remarried and had another kid. He doesn't get that I'm hurt because he made me feel like I didn't matter, like I was replaceable, like his love was conditional on me being convenient. Some people think 8 years of silence is extreme. They say everyone makes mistakes, that fathers aren't perfect, that I should reach out before it's too late. But I've had 8 years of peace. 8 years without feeling like I'm not good enough. 8 years without competing for attention with a baby. 8 years without Vanessa's passive-aggressive comments and my dad's refusal to protect me. If my dad wants a relationship with me, he knows what he needs to do. He needs to acknowledge what happened. He needs to apologize sincerely, not just say sorry to smooth things over. He needs to understand that his actions had consequences, and that those consequences include losing a relationship with his oldest child. Until that happens, I'm comfortable with the silence. People ask if I'll regret this when he's gone. Maybe I will, but I'll regret even more if I waste more years trying to have a relationship with someone who fundamentally doesn't value me. Life's too short to keep begging people to care about you, even if that person is your father. Let's move to the next story. I worked in the restaurant industry for 6 years, and I've seen a lot of terrible customer behavior. But nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to what I witnessed on a Saturday night shift about 3 years ago. This is the story of a customer meltdown so spectacular, so completely unhinged, that we still talk about it at staff gatherings. I was working as a server at a mid-range Italian restaurant. Not super fancy, but nice enough that people would come for anniversaries and birthdays. We had white tablecloths, candles, wine lists, the whole ambiance thing. It was a busy Saturday night, every table full, kitchen running behind, typical weekend chaos. A woman came in with a reservation for 6 people at 7. She was already in a mood when she arrived, complaining that she'd been waiting at the host stand for forever, even though it had been maybe 2 minutes. The host seated her party at a round table near the window, which was actually one of our better tables with a nice view. The woman, let's call her Karen because that's basically what she was, immediately started complaining. The table was too close to the door. There was too much light from the window. The chairs weren't comfortable. The host apologized and offered to move them to a different table, but Karen said she didn't want to move now that they were already seated. So, problem not actually solved, but okay. I was assigned to their table. I went over with menus and water, did my standard greeting, explained the specials. Karen interrupted me halfway. Through to ask if we had gluten-free options. I said yes. We had several dishes that could be modified to be gluten-free. She asked which ones. I started listing them. She interrupted again to ask if our kitchen was completely gluten-free. I explained that no, we had a regular kitchen, but we were very careful about cross-contamination. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically and said that wasn't good enough, that she had celiac disease and needed a completely gluten-free environment. I apologized and explained that we did our best, but couldn't guarantee zero cross-contamination since we weren't a dedicated gluten-free facility. She sighed, like I just told her the worst news of her life, and said she'd figure something out. The rest of her party seemed nice. They ordered drinks and appetizers without issue. Karen spent 5 full minutes interrogating me about every ingredient in every dish. Did the soup have flour? Was the sauce thickened with wheat? Were the vegetables cooked in the same oil as breaded items? I answered everything patiently, even checking with the kitchen on a few things. Finally, Karen ordered a salad. Just a salad. She wanted it with no croutons, dressing on the side, no cheese, extra vegetables, and she wanted me to confirm with the chef that absolutely no gluten would touch her food. I wrote it all down, confirmed it back to her, and went to put in the orders. The kitchen was slammed, tickets were backing up, cooks were stressed, everyone was moving at maximum speed. I put in the orders and made sure to note Karen's allergies clearly. The chef acknowledged it and said they'd be extra careful. 20 minutes later, I brought out the appetizers. Everyone's food looked great. Karen inspected her caprese salad like she was a food safety inspector. She poked at the mozzarella, examined the basil, and then asked if I was sure the balsamic glaze was gluten-free. I confirmed that yes, it was just balsamic vinegar reduced down. She took one bite, made a face, and pushed the plate away. I asked if something was wrong. She said it tasted like gluten. I honestly didn't know how to respond to that. I asked if she wanted me to have the kitchen remake it. She said no, she'd just wait for her entree. Her friends looked embarrassed but didn't say anything. Entree came out about 15 minutes later. Karen had ordered grilled chicken with vegetables, everything prepared separately, no sauces. It was literally the safest, most plain dish we had. I put it in front of her, and before she even touched it, she said it looked wrong. I asked what was wrong about it. She couldn't articulate it, just said it looked like it had gluten on it. At this point, I was pretty sure she was just being difficult for the sake of being difficult. But I stayed professional, offered to have the kitchen remake it, asked what specifically she wanted changed. She said she wanted to talk to the manager. I said I'd get him right away. My manager came over. All customer service smiles. Karen launched into a complaint about how we clearly didn't take her allergy seriously, how her food looked contaminated, how she felt unsafe eating here. My manager apologized profusely, offered to have the chef make her a completely new meal with fresh ingredients, promised they'd be extra careful. Karen said fine, but she wanted to watch them make it. That's not something we normally allowed, but my manager, desperate to resolve the situation, agreed. He brought Karen back to the kitchen. The kitchen staff was not thrilled about having a customer in their workspace during a busy dinner rush, but they kept their cool. Karen stood there, arms crossed, watching like a hawk as the chef prepared her chicken and vegetables on a clean grill with fresh utensils. The chef did everything right. New gloves, new cutting board, new pan, ingredients from sealed containers. Karen criticized every step. The grill wasn't clean enough. The spatula looked used. The vegetables were cut on a board that might have touched gluten. The chef, to his credit, stayed calm and accommodated every request. Finally, the dish was ready. Karen watched as the chef plated it, and then she followed my manager back to her table. I brought the plate out personally, set it in front of her. She looked at it, picked up her fork, and took one bite. Just one bite. Then she spit it out into her napkin and declared that it had gluten in it, and she could tell, and she was going to get sick. My manager was at a loss. He just watched the chef prepare the meal with extreme caution. There was no gluten anywhere near her food. He gently suggested that perhaps she was being overly cautious, that he could personally guarantee the meal was safe. Karen lost it. She stood up from the table and started yelling. She was going to sue us. We were trying to poison her. This was discrimination against people with disabilities. She was going to leave reviews on every site. She was going to call the health department. Her friends were trying to calm her down, but she was on a roll. Other diners were staring. The restaurant got quiet. Karen continued her rant, now claiming that she could feel her throat closing up, that she was having an allergic reaction, that she needed an ambulance. One of her friends quietly said that Karen didn't actually have celiac disease. She just decided last month that she was gluten sensitive. Karen whirled on her friend and screamed at her for betraying her. The friend looked mortified, but stood her ground, saying that this was embarrassing and they should just pay and leave. Karen refused. She wanted her entire table's meal comped because of her trauma. My manager, now visibly frustrated, said he'd comp her meal, but everyone else had eaten their food without issue and needed to pay. Karen demanded the entire table be free. My manager refused. Karen threatened to call the police. At this point, my manager was done. He told Karen she needed to leave. She refused, sitting back down and crossing her arms. My manager said if she didn't leave, he'd call the police himself. Karen dared him to do it. So he did. He called the police. Karen seemed shocked that he'd actually done it, but she still refused to leave. For 10 minutes, we all just waited. Karen sitting at the table, arms crossed, her friends mortified, other diners watching the drama unfold, staff unsure what to do. 2 police officers arrived. My manager explained the situation. The officers talked to Karen, asked her to leave peacefully. She refused, saying she was the victim here. The officers were patient at first, but when Karen continued to refuse, they told her she could leave voluntarily or be escorted out. She finally stood up, grabbed her purse, and marched toward the door, announcing loudly that she was never coming back, and neither were her friends. Her friends apologized to us, paid for their meals plus a generous tip, and hurried after her. As Karen was leaving, she turned and yelled one final time that she hoped our restaurant got shut down. Then she was gone. The restaurant erupted in applause. Actual applause from other diners. Several people came up to my manager and me to say they'd witnessed the whole thing and thought we'd handled it professionally. One couple even left an extra tip specifically for having to deal with that situation. We found out later that Karen did indeed leave reviews, 1-star reviews on every platform, claiming we'd tried to give her gluten despite her allergy, that we discriminated against her, that the manager had assaulted her by calling the police. The reviews were so over the top that most people probably didn't take them seriously, but it was still annoying. The restaurant's owner responded to each review calmly, explaining that they'd gone above and beyond to accommodate her requests, and that she'd been asked to leave only after becoming verbally abusive to staff and refusing to pay. Several other customers who'd been there that night left their own reviews supporting us and contradicting Karen's version of events. Karen became legendary among our staff. Whenever we had a difficult customer, someone would joke that at least they're not Karen level yet. New servers would hear the story during training as an example of how some people just can't be satisfied no matter what you do. I don't know if Karen ever ate at another restaurant, but I genuinely hope for those servers' sake that she didn't. All right, let's jump into the next one. My grandmother passed away 2 years ago at 89 years old. She was an amazing woman, sharp until the end, independent, generous, and absolutely hilarious. She'd survived the Depression, raised 4 kids mostly alone after my grandfather died young, and built a small but comfortable life for herself. When she died, she left behind a house, some savings, and a very detailed will. The will divided her assets among her 4 children, my mom, and my 3 uncles. Everything was supposed to be split equally. The house would be sold, and the proceeds divided 4 ways. Her savings account, her car, her jewelry, everything split evenly. It seemed straightforward. It was not straightforward. My youngest uncle, let's call him Rick, decided that he deserved more than everyone else. His reasoning was that he'd lived closest to my grandmother and had helped her out the most in her final years, which was true. He lived in the same town, visited regularly, helped with home repairs and errands, but the rest of the family had also contributed. My mom drove 6 hours each way once a month to visit and help. My other uncles called regularly, sent money for things Grandma needed, visited when they could. Rick believed his physical proximity entitled him to a larger share. At the first family meeting after the funeral, he announced that he wanted 50% of everything. The other 3 siblings could split the remaining 50%. His logic was that he'd earned it by being there. My mom and my other uncles were shocked. The will was clear. Equal 4-way split. Rick didn't care about the will. He said wills could be contested, that he'd get a lawyer, that he'd prove he deserved more. My mom tried to reason with him, pointing out that Grandma had specifically wanted everything divided equally. Rick said Grandma didn't understand how much work he'd put in. That statement pissed everyone off. Grandma had been completely mentally sound when she made her will. She'd updated it just 2 years before she died, working with a lawyer to make sure everything was exactly how she wanted it. She'd even included a clause specifically stating that the division should be equal and that she appreciated all her children equally. But Rick wouldn't let it go. He hired a lawyer and filed a will contest. His claim was undue influence, that my mom and other uncles had somehow pressured Grandma into making the will equal when she really wanted to give Rick more. It was absurd. There were witnesses to the will signing. There was documentation from Grandma's lawyer stating she was of sound mind and clear about her wishes. But Rick pressed forward anyway. The legal battle dragged on for over a year. During that time, the house couldn't be sold, the assets couldn't be distributed, and family relationships disintegrated. Family gatherings became impossible because nobody wanted to be around Rick. My cousins took sides. Rick's kids supported him, obviously. The rest of us supported the original will. Rick's lawyer tried every angle. They questioned Grandma's mental capacity, even though her doctor testified that she'd been sharp until her final days. They claimed the will was signed under duress, even though it was signed in a lawyer's office with witnesses. They argued that Rick's contributions to Grandma's care should count as financial compensation that entitled him to more. Nothing stuck. Meanwhile, the legal fees were piling up. Each of the siblings had to hire their own lawyers to defend the will. Thousands of dollars that could have been part of the inheritance were instead going to attorneys. My mom was stressed constantly, crying about how her brother was tearing the family apart over money. About 8 months into the legal battle, Rick's wife left him. Apparently, she'd been against the whole thing from the start, thought he was being greedy and ridiculous. When he wouldn't drop the case, she filed for divorce. Rick blamed the rest of the family for this too, saying we'd turned his wife against him. The case finally went to court after 14 months. The judge reviewed all the evidence, the will itself, testimony from Grandma's lawyer, medical records, witness statements. It took about 2 hours for the judge to rule completely in favor of upholding the original will. The judge even made a comment about how it was clear that Grandma's wishes were being disrespected by the contest. Rick was ordered to pay court costs, which were substantial. He'd also spent a fortune on his own lawyer. In total, he probably spent $60,000 trying to get a larger share of an inheritance that was worth about $300,000 to him anyway. If he'd just accepted the original will, he'd have gotten $75,000. Instead, after legal fees, he probably netted $20,000. But the real cost wasn't the money, it was the family. Rick hasn't spoken to my mom or my other uncles in over a year. His kids barely talk to their cousins. Holiday gatherings are awkward because Rick isn't invited. My grandmother's legacy, which should have been one of family and love, became a story about greed and legal battles. The house finally sold 6 months after the court case ended. The proceeds were divided exactly as Grandma had specified, 4 equal shares. My mom used her share to pay off some debt and take a vacation she'd been putting off for years. My uncles did similar things. I don't know what Rick did with his share, but I hope it was worth destroying his family over. I think about my grandma sometimes and how disappointed she'd be. She valued family above everything. She'd survived hard times by relying on family, and one of her sons decided that money was more important than honoring her wishes or maintaining relationships with his siblings. It's sad and infuriating in equal measure. The lesson I took from this: when someone shows you who they are, believe them. Rick showed us that he values money over family, that he's willing to drag everyone through legal hell to get what he wants, and that he doesn't respect the wishes of the people he claims to love. We believed him, and we've adjusted our relationships accordingly. Let's move on to the next story. I moved to a new city for a job right after college, and I needed to find a place to live quickly. I found a roommate through an online listing. Her name was Ashley. She seemed normal in her messages, and the apartment was in a good location at a reasonable price. I should have known it was too good to be true. The first week was fine. Ashley was friendly enough, showed me around the neighborhood, gave me space to unpack and settle in. We established some basic ground rules about cleaning schedules, shared expenses, quiet hours. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Then week 2 happened. I came home from work one evening to find Ashley had rearranged the entire living room. Not just moved a few things, completely rearranged everything. The couch was on the opposite wall. The TV was moved. My decorations were taken down and replaced with hers. I was confused, but tried to be chill about it. I asked her why she changed everything. She said she felt like it needed new energy and didn't think she needed to ask permission since it was shared space. I pointed out that it was shared space, which meant we should both agree on major changes. She rolled her eyes and said I was being controlling. I decided to pick my battles and let it go. Mistake number 1. A few days later, I noticed my food was disappearing from the fridge. Not all of it, just random things. A yogurt here, some leftovers there, half my lunch meat. I mentioned it to Ashley, thinking maybe she'd accidentally grabbed my stuff thinking it was hers. She denied touching anything. I didn't push it because I didn't want to start drama. The food situation got worse. My milk would be almost empty when I just bought it. My snacks vanished. The expensive cheese I'd bought for a recipe disappeared completely. I started labeling everything with my name. Ashley acted offended, asking if I didn't trust her. I explained that food was going missing, and I just wanted to keep track of what was mine. She said I was being paranoid. Then my stuff started moving. Not big things, just small items. My favorite coffee mug would be in a different cabinet. My keys wouldn't be where I left them. My shoes would be moved from the front door to the closet. When I'd ask Ashley about it, she'd say she was organizing or tidying up. I asked her to please not move my belongings. She said I was being unreasonable about her trying to keep the apartment clean. About a month in, I started noticing Ashley was going into my room when I wasn't home. I could tell because things would be slightly off. My laptop moved, my closet door open when I always kept it closed, my desk drawer not quite shut all the way. I confronted her about it. She denied it completely, said I was imagining things, accused me of being paranoid again. I bought a lock for my bedroom door. Ashley threw a fit. She said it was weird and antisocial to lock your door in your own apartment. I explained that I valued my privacy and had a right to secure my personal space. She said I was creating a hostile living environment. I installed the lock anyway. Things escalated quickly after that. Ashley started being passive-aggressive about everything. She'd blast music late at night, then claim she didn't realize it was loud. She'd leave dirty dishes in the sink for days, then get mad when I asked her to clean them. She'd use all the hot water in the morning, making me late for work because I had to wait for the water heater to recover. The breaking point came about 2 months into living together. I came home to find Ashley had brought home a cat. A full-grown cat. We'd never discussed pets, and our lease specifically prohibited them. I asked her what she was thinking. She said the cat was a therapy animal, and therefore allowed. I asked if she had documentation for that. She said she didn't need documentation, that I was being discriminatory against people with mental health issues. I read the lease. Therapy animals required documentation and landlord approval. Ashley had neither. I told her the cat had to go, or we'd both get evicted. She refused. I contacted the landlord to explain the situation and make it clear that I hadn't approved or been informed about the cat. The landlord gave Ashley a week to remove the cat or face eviction. Ashley blamed me, said I'd betrayed her, called me heartless for wanting to get rid of her support animal. She kept the cat for the entire week, then at the last possible moment gave it to a friend. She didn't speak to me for 3 days afterward except to leave passive-aggressive notes around the apartment. I started looking for a new place immediately. Living with Ashley had become unbearable, but I was locked into a year-long lease, and breaking it would cost me thousands of dollars. I was stuck for at least another 8 months. Ashley's behavior got even worse after the cat incident. She started having people over constantly, loud parties on weeknights, people I'd never met sleeping on our couch, strangers in the apartment at all hours. When I'd ask her to tone it down, she'd say I was being antisocial and needed to loosen up. One night, I came home at 11 to find a full party in progress. At least 20 people, music blaring, people I didn't know everywhere, including in my bathroom. I asked Ashley to end the party. She laughed and told me to relax. I went to my locked room and called the landlord. The landlord showed up and shut down the party, threatening Ashley with eviction if it happened again. Ashley was furious with me. She said I'd embarrassed her in front of her friends, that I was a terrible roommate, that she couldn't wait until the lease was up. The feeling was mutual. The next few months were a Cold War. We communicated only when absolutely necessary. Ashley continued to push boundaries, using my belongings without asking, eating my food despite labels, playing loud music at inappropriate times. I documented everything with photos and notes, building a case in case I needed to involve the landlord again. Around month 7, I found out Ashley was subletting my room on Airbnb when I was a kid traveling for work. She'd give strangers keys to the apartment and let them sleep in my room while I was gone. When I discovered this, I lost it. I confronted her with evidence. I'd found her Airbnb listing using photos of my room. She tried to justify it by saying she was sharing the space to make extra money and that I wasn't using the room when I traveled. I reported her to the landlord and to Airbnb. The landlord gave her a final warning. Airbnb suspended her account. Ashley threatened to sue me for interfering with her business. I told her to go ahead, that I had plenty of documentation of her lease violations. The final 2 months of the lease were tense but quieter. Ashley seemed to realize she'd pushed too far and backed off slightly. She still wasn't pleasant to live with, but at least she stopped doing things that could get us evicted. I counted down the days until the lease ended. When moving day finally came, I'd never been so happy to leave an apartment. I did a thorough walkthrough with the landlord to make sure everything was documented and nothing was damaged. Ashley had already moved out by then and apparently left the place a mess. The landlord had to use part of her security deposit for cleaning and repairs. I moved into a studio apartment, more expensive, smaller, but I lived alone. The peace and quiet and privacy were worth every extra penny. I've had other roommates since then, good ones who respect boundaries and communicate like adults. But Ashley remains my worst roommate story, the cautionary tale I tell people about the importance of thorough screening and clear lease agreements. Looking back, I should have trusted my gut earlier. The warning signs were there from week 2, but I kept trying to be accommodating, kept trying to avoid conflict, kept hoping things would get better. They never did. Sometimes the solution to a bad situation is to cut your losses and get out, even if it costs money. Your sanity and peace of mind are worth more than a lease agreement. Let's get into the next story. This story still creeps me out when I think about it. It started innocently enough. I posted a photo on Instagram of my coffee and breakfast at a local cafe. I'm not a big social media person, but I occasionally post stuff like everyone else. The photo got the usual likes from friends and family. Normal stuff. Then I got a comment from someone I didn't recognize. The username was something generic like City Explorer, followed by numbers. The comment said, "Great choice. That cafe has the best pastries in the morning." Seemed harmless. I figured it was just another local person who went to the same cafe. I liked the comment and moved on. A few days later, I posted a photo from a hiking trail. Again, normal stuff. City Explorer commented again. "Beautiful trail. I was just there last weekend. Did you see the waterfall at the end?" I thought it was a bit coincidental that this person had been to the same trail recently, but I live in a popular area for outdoor activities. Didn't seem too weird yet. Then it got stranger. I posted a photo of my new apartment building's view, just the skyline, nothing identifying. City Explorer commented within minutes, "Nice view. The west side of the city has the best sunsets." My apartment was on the west side. I hadn't mentioned that anywhere in the post. That's when I started feeling uncomfortable. I checked City Explorer's profile. It was private, with 0 posts, 0 followers, 0 following. A completely blank account except for the comments on my posts. I sent them a message asking how they knew I was on the west side. No response. I blocked the account and forgot about it. A week later, I posted a photo from a bookstore. I'm a big reader, and I'd found a rare book I'd been looking for. Within an hour, there was a comment from a new account. "Book lover, Dan's Dan?" Plus numbers saying that bookstore is amazing. I love their rare fiction section. The bookstore did have a rare fiction section where my photo was taken. I immediately knew it was the same person. I blocked that account too. But they kept making new ones. Every time I posted something, a new account would comment with suspiciously specific knowledge about the location or context. I made my Instagram private, only allowing followers I actually knew. The accounts tried to follow me. I denied them all. Then the accounts started commenting on my friends' posts, specifically posts that featured me. A friend posted a group photo from a birthday dinner. One of these accounts commented asking if we enjoyed a specific menu item from that restaurant. My friend messaged me asking if I knew who this person was. I didn't. I stopped posting on Instagram entirely. But the person found my Twitter, my LinkedIn, even my old Facebook account I barely used. Different usernames, but always the same pattern. Generic names with numbers, blank profiles, comments showing they knew details about my life they shouldn't know. I tried to figure out who it was. I went through everyone I knew, trying to think of who might do this. An ex. I hadn't dated anyone recently. A coworker. Nobody seemed weird or overly interested in me. A family member playing a prank. I asked around, and everyone denied it. I was genuinely stumped and increasingly freaked out. The messages started about a month into this. The accounts would DM me things like, "Saw you at the grocery store today, you looked nice," or "Your new haircut suits you." These weren't things I'd posted about. These were things they'd seen in person. Someone was watching me in real life and connecting it to my online presence. I went to the police. They took a report, but said, unless there were direct threats, there wasn't much they could do. Social media stalking is hard to prosecute, especially when the person is using fake accounts and hasn't made any explicit threats. They advised me to document everything and let them know if the behavior escalated. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings. I looked for anyone following me, anyone paying too much attention, anyone with their phone pointed my direction. The paranoia was exhausting. I'd go to the grocery store and wonder if someone was watching. I'd go for a run and constantly look behind me. It was affecting my quality of life. My friends suggested I delete all my social media. I considered it, but part of me was angry. Why should I have to delete my accounts and hide because some creep couldn't respect boundaries? I decided to go the opposite direction. I started posting fake information. I posted about going to a restaurant I wasn't actually going to. Sure enough, one of the stalker accounts commented about how they loved that restaurant. I posted about a movie I was about to see, but didn't actually go to. They commented about that movie too. They were reacting to everything I posted, which confirmed they were obsessively monitoring my accounts. With this information, I set a trap. I posted about planning to attend a specific public event, a farmer's market on Saturday morning. I made it seem like I was really excited about it and would definitely be there. I had no intention of going. Instead, I asked a friend to go and try to spot anyone suspicious, anyone alone, and watching for someone, anyone who seemed to be looking for me. My friend went. She reported back that there was a guy who fit that description, middle-aged, alone, kept checking his phone and looking around like he was waiting for someone. She took a discreet photo. I didn't recognize him at all. Not from work, not from my social circle, not from anywhere I could remember. I took the photo to the police. With this lead, plus all my documentation of the stalking behavior, they were able to do more. They identified the man. Turned out he was someone who'd seen me at a coffee shop months ago, and became obsessed. He'd followed me to figure out my regular locations, found my social media, and started this whole creepy campaign. He'd been tracking my posts and trying to, accidentally, run into me at places I mentioned. The police contacted him with a warning. I filed for a restraining order. The judge granted it, given all the evidence of stalking behavior. The man was ordered to stay away from me and stop all contact, including online. He violated it once, created another fake account to message me, and was arrested. After that, it finally stopped. I learned a lot from this experience. I learned that you can't be too careful with what you post online. I stopped geotagging posts. I stopped posting in real time. If I was somewhere, I'd post about it after I'd already left. I became much more selective about what personal information I shared publicly. I also learned that the police take these things more seriously when you have documentation. Screenshots of every weird comment, every suspicious account, every message. All of that helped build the case. If you're experiencing something similar, document everything. It might feel like overkill in the moment, but it's essential if you need to take legal action. The whole situation lasted about 3 months from the first weird comment to the restraining order. 3 months of anxiety, paranoia, and feeling unsafe in my own city. It's been 2 years now, and I still get nervous when I post anything online. I still check who's around me in public. That feeling of being watched never fully goes away. Social media makes it easy to share our lives, but it also makes it easy for the wrong people to insert themselves into our lives. There's no perfect solution except being cautious, trusting your instincts, and taking action when something feels wrong. If someone's behavior makes you uncomfortable online, block them immediately. If it continues or escalates, involve the authorities. Don't wait and hope it gets better. It usually doesn't. All right, let's move to the next one. I was a bridesmaid in my best friend's wedding last year, and I witnessed what might be the most deliberate, calculated act of wedding sabotage I've ever seen. This wasn't someone accidentally spilling wine on a dress or showing up late. This was intentional, cruel, and absolutely shocking to watch unfold. My best friend Emily had been planning her wedding for over a year. She's the kind of person who has Pinterest boards for everything, who color coordinates her closet, who makes spreadsheets for fun. Her wedding planning was no different. Every detail was meticulously planned and organized. The wedding was going to be at a vineyard, elegant, but not stuffy, with lots of personal touches. The maid of honor was Emily's sister, Rachel. Emily and Rachel had always had a complicated relationship. Rachel was the older sister, used to being the center of attention, and didn't handle it well when Emily got engaged first. There were little comments throughout the engagement, things like, "I thought I'd be the first to get married," or, "I guess my wedding will have to be even bigger now." Emily mostly laughed it off, thinking Rachel was just joking around. The warning signs were there during the planning process. Rachel was unenthusiastic about everything, didn't like the venue, thought the colors were boring, said the guest list was too long. She'd volunteer to help with things and then not follow through. She'd commit to tasks and then do them wrong on purpose, requiring Emily to redo everything. But Emily kept giving her the benefit of the doubt because she's family. The real sabotage started the week before the wedding. Rachel was supposed to organize the bachelorette party. She'd been planning it for months, or so she said. The day before the bachelorette party, Rachel texted the group chat saying she'd forgotten to make reservations anywhere, and maybe we should just cancel. After some panic and scrambling, we other bridesmaids managed to put together a last-minute celebration. It wasn't what Emily had wanted, but we made it work. Then Rachel, accidentally, gave the caterer the wrong head count. Emily had 75 guests. Rachel told the caterer 100. This meant Emily was suddenly on the hook for 25 extra meals she didn't need and couldn't afford. When confronted, Rachel said she must have misheard when Emily told her the number. The day before the wedding, Rachel was supposed to pick up the flowers from the florist. She showed up 3 hours late after the florist had closed. The flowers were left outside in the heat and several arrangements were wilted. Rachel claimed her car broke down, but later someone saw her at a coffee shop during those 3 hours, clearly not dealing with any car problems. The morning of the wedding, Rachel showed up to hair and makeup 2 hours late. This threw off the entire schedule. The photographer was supposed to start at a certain time for getting ready photos. The limo was supposed to pick us up at a certain time to get to the venue. Everything was delayed because Rachel was late. Her excuse? She slept through her alarm. She didn't seem sorry at all. At the venue, Rachel's sabotage got more obvious. The seating chart that Emily had spent hours perfecting was accidentally knocked over and scattered. Rachel offered to help put it back together, but arranged it wrong, seating people with family members they were fighting with, splitting up couples, generally creating chaos. We didn't discover this until guests were already at the reception finding their seats. During the ceremony, Rachel's phone went off. Not just a buzz or a quiet ring. Her full ringtone played loudly during the vows. She fumbled with her phone, making it ring even longer before finally silencing it. Emily was saying, "I do," while Rachel's phone blared music. People were staring. It was mortifying. At the reception, Rachel's speech as maid of honor was a disaster. Instead of talking about Emily and sharing sweet memories, she spent 5 minutes talking about herself, about her own relationship, about how she had always imagined her wedding would be different, about how weird it was that her little sister was married first. It was uncomfortable and inappropriate. Emily's face during the speech was heartbreaking. You could see she was trying not to cry. Then came the cake cutting. The venue had set up the cake on a specific table, away from the dancing area to keep it safe. Rachel suggested moving it closer to the dance floor for better photo opportunities. The wedding planner advised against it, but Rachel insisted. She personally moved the cake. 10 minutes later, someone backed into the table while dancing. The cake toppled. The top 2 tiers were destroyed. Emily's carefully chosen, expensive custom cake was ruined. Rachel's response? "Oops. At least we got one good photo before it fell." No apology, no attempt to help fix it. She just shrugged and walked away. The venue staff managed to salvage the bottom tier and quickly rearranged it, but it wasn't what Emily had planned. More importantly, this was the culmination of a full day of sabotage that anyone paying attention could see was deliberate. I pulled Rachel aside and confronted her. I asked her why she was doing this, why she was ruining her sister's wedding. She acted innocent, said she didn't know what I was talking about, claimed everything was just unfortunate accidents. But her smirk told me everything I needed to know. She was enjoying this. I told Emily after the wedding. I felt like she needed to know that all these accidents weren't accidents. Emily said she'd suspected, but didn't want to believe her own sister would sabotage her wedding. We went through everything: the bachelorette party, the caterer, the flowers, the seating chart, the phone, the speech, the cake. Each incident alone could be an accident. All of them together formed a pattern. Emily confronted Rachel a few weeks later. Rachel denied everything, said Emily was being paranoid and ungrateful. She actually said Emily should be thanking her for all the hard work she'd done as maid of honor. Emily tried to explain how hurt she was, how all these problems had affected her wedding day. Rachel didn't care. She said Emily was being dramatic and that weddings don't have to be perfect. The sisters haven't spoken since. Emily initially felt guilty about cutting off her sister, but the other bridesmaids and I reminded her of everything that happened. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. This was deliberate, sustained sabotage by someone who was supposed to love and support her. Emily deserves better than that. The sad part is that despite all the sabotage, Emily's wedding was still beautiful. She married someone who loves her. They had a great time with their guests, and they started their life together, surrounded by people who actually care about them. Rachel managed to cause stress and problems, but she didn't manage to ruin the day entirely. I've been a bridesmaid 4 times now, and I've never seen anything like Rachel's behavior. Most maid of honor disasters are about incompetence or flakiness. people who don't follow through because they're disorganized or overwhelmed. Rachel was different. She was competent enough to handle the responsibilities. She just chose not to. She chose to sabotage. And that's so much worse. If you're planning a wedding and someone close to you seems resentful or unenthusiastic, trust your gut. You don't have to include someone in your wedding party just because of your relationship to them. It's better to have bridesmaids who are genuinely happy for you than to have a sister who's going to spend the whole time undermining you. Emily learned that lesson the hard way. Let's jump into the next story. I work in a standard corporate office. Cubicles, fluorescent lights, passive-aggressive emails, the whole deal. About a year ago, weird things started happening. Small things at first. Someone's lunch would go missing from the break room fridge. Office supplies would disappear. The coffee pot would be empty when someone had just made a full pot 30 minutes earlier. People grumbled, but mostly shrugged it off. Offices are full of people. Sometimes stuff goes missing. Maybe someone grabbed the wrong lunch. Maybe someone borrowed a stapler and forgot to return it. The coffee thing was annoying, but not worth investigating. Then the incidents got weirder. One morning, we all came in to find every desk chair in the office had been lowered to the absolute minimum height. All 60-something chairs, adjusted so that sitting in them meant your knees were practically at your chin. It took hours to readjust everything. Nobody knew who did it or why. Security footage showed someone in a hoodie come in around 3 in the morning, spend 30 minutes lowering chairs, and leave. They'd tailgated behind the cleaning crew to get in. A week later, someone replaced all the motivational posters in the break room with demotivational ones. The kind that say things like, "Maybe the purpose of your life is to serve as a warning to others," with a picture of a sinking ship. Management was not amused. They took the posters down, but everyone kind of enjoyed the brief moment of office humor. Then came the rubber ducks. Someone placed small rubber ducks around the office, on keyboards, in drawers, on top of monitors, in the bathroom stalls. Hundreds of little yellow rubber ducks everywhere. They kept appearing for weeks. We'd find them all, throw them out, and the next day there'd be more. It became a game, trying to figure out who was doing it. The leading theory was that it was someone disgruntled with management, pulling pranks to stick it to the corporate system. But the pranks weren't mean-spirited. They were annoying and time-consuming, but kind of funny. Whoever was doing this had access to the office after hours, and a lot of dedication to the bit. Management decided to investigate. They reviewed more security footage, interviewed staff, tried to identify patterns. The person was always in a hoodie, always came in during the middle of the night, always managed to avoid showing their face to cameras. Security proposed installing more cameras. Management approved the budget. Before the new cameras could be installed, the pranks escalated. Someone filled the CEO's office with balloons, floor to ceiling, completely packed with balloons. It took half a day to remove them all. Attached to one balloon was a note that said, "Thanks for the raise." That was weird because the company had recently announced that raises were being postponed due to budget concerns. Was this protest? Mockery? Nobody knew. Then someone reorganized the entire supply closet alphabetically. Not by category, alphabetically. So batteries were next to binders, folders were next to scotch tape, post-its were next to pens. It was chaos, but also impressively thorough. Whoever did this had spent hours meticulously organizing. Based on the first letter of each item's name, the next prank was my favorite. Someone labeled everything in the office. And, I mean everything. Chairs were labeled chair. Desks were labeled desk. The door was labeled door. The floor was labeled floor. Coffee mugs were labeled coffee mug. There were hundreds of labels. The copy machine had a label that said copy machine, and another label that said makes copies of things, and another label that said currently operational. It was absurd and hilarious. At this point, the office was divided. Some people were annoyed and wanted the pranks to stop. Others were entertained and wanted to know who was creative enough to pull this off. Management was firmly in the make it stop camp. and increase their investigation efforts. They brought in IT to analyze security footage with better software. They implemented a new key card system that tracked who came and went at what times. They interviewed the cleaning crew, thinking maybe someone was bribing them for access. Nothing worked. The prankster always found a way in, always avoided showing their face, always left no trace except the prank itself. The pranks continued. Someone switched all the desk nameplates, so everyone came in one morning to find their names on someone else's desk. Someone replaced the elevator music with different genres throughout the day. Classical in the morning, death metal at noon, smooth jazz in the afternoon, whale sounds in the evening. Someone put googly eyes on everything in the break room. Hundreds of googly eyes on the fridge, microwave, coffee maker, vending machine, table, chairs. Everything had googly eyes. 6 months into this, I was working late one night finishing a project. It was around 9, and the office was empty except for me. I heard a noise coming from the supply closet. I quietly walked over and peeked in. There was Jennifer, a woman from accounting, pulling labels out of a box, the labels that had been used to label everything in the office. I just stood there watching for a moment, completely shocked. Jennifer was one of the quietest people in the office. She barely spoke in meetings, kept to herself, seemed totally unremarkable. And here she was, clearly preparing the next prank. She turned around and saw me. We locked eyes. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she sighed and said, "You gonna tell management?" I told her I needed an explanation first, so Jennifer told me her story. She'd been working at the company for 8 years. She was good at her job, never caused problems, consistently got positive reviews, but she'd been passed over for promotion 5 times. 5 times she'd been told she was too quiet, or didn't have enough presence, or needed to be more assertive. Meanwhile, louder, less qualified people got promoted around her. The final straw was when a guy who'd been there for only 2 years got the promotion she'd been working toward. Management's explanation was that he showed more initiative. Jennifer decided to show some initiative of her own, just not the kind they expected. The pranks were her way of coping with the frustration. They gave her something to look forward to. Planning them, executing them, watching everyone try to figure it out. It made the job bearable. She didn't think she was hurting anyone. The pranks were harmless, even fun. She just wanted to shake up the monotony and maybe make a statement about how ridiculous corporate culture can be. I asked her about the security measures, how she kept avoiding getting caught. She showed me. She'd been using a service entrance that didn't have cameras, wearing different hoodies and hats to avoid being identified, timing her entries between cleaning crew shifts. She'd done her homework. I was faced with a choice: tell management and end the pranks, probably getting Jennifer fired, or keep her secret and let the pranks continue. I thought about it for a moment. The pranks really weren't hurting anyone. They were actually the most interesting thing about working here. And Jennifer clearly needed this outlet. I made a deal with her. I wouldn't tell management, but she had to be more careful. No more escalating pranks that caused real disruptions. Keep it funny and harmless, and maybe slow down the frequency so it didn't seem as urgent to catch whoever was doing it. Jennifer agreed. The pranks continued, but became less frequent and more subtle. A few googly eyes here and there, an occasional rubber duck. Once in a while, a funny poster. Management eventually gave up actively investigating, though they kept the new security measures in place. I left that company about 6 months ago for a new job. Before I left, Jennifer gave me a rubber duck as a goodbye present. I keep it on my desk at my new office as a reminder that sometimes people need harmless ways to rebel against systems that don't value them. And sometimes the quiet person in accounting is the most interesting person in the whole building. Let's move on to the next story. I bought my first house 3 years ago. It's a small 2-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but perfect for me. My neighbor to the left is an elderly woman who mostly keeps to herself. My neighbor to the right is where this story begins. Let's call him Tom. Tom seemed normal at first. He introduced himself when I moved in, helped me carry a few boxes, seemed friendly enough. Then I put up a fence. This is where everything went wrong. My property had no fence when I bought it. I wanted one for privacy and because I was planning to get a dog eventually. I had a survey done to confirm the exact property line, hired a contractor, got all the necessary permits. Everything was done by the book. The fence went up exactly on my property line, not an inch over. Tom lost his mind. He claimed the fence was on his property. I showed him the survey. He said the survey was wrong. I showed him the permits. He said the city made a mistake. I offered to pay for an independent survey. He refused. He just kept insisting the fence was over the line and needed to come down. When I wouldn't remove the fence, Tom started a campaign of petty revenge. First, he'd throw his yard waste over the fence into my yard. Grass clippings, leaves, branches. I'd wake up to piles of debris on my side. I asked him to stop. He denied doing it, even though I'd literally seen him do it. Next, he started parking his car so close to my driveway that I could barely get my car in and out. Technically, he was parked on the street, which was legal, but he'd position his car in the most inconvenient way possible. I'd have to do a 20-point turn to get out of my own driveway. Then he got a dog, a large, loud dog that he kept outside all day. The dog would bark constantly. I'm talking nonstop barking from 7 in the morning until Tom came home from work around 6. I work from home. The barking made it nearly impossible to take phone calls or concentrate. I bought noise-canceling headphones. They barely helped. I tried talking to Tom about the dog. He said the dog was just being a dog, and I needed to stop complaining. I pointed out that the constant barking was affecting my ability to work. He said I should get a real job in an office if noise bothered me. I filed a noise complaint with the city. They sent someone out, measured the decibel levels, confirmed it violated noise ordinances, and gave Tom a warning. Tom retaliated by installing bright floodlights pointed directly at my bedroom windows. These weren't subtle lights. These were stadium-level floodlights that turned on at dusk and stayed on all night. My bedroom was lit up like daytime 24/7. I put up blackout curtains, but the light was so intense it still seeped around the edges. I called the city about the lights. They said as long as the lights were on Tom's property and weren't causing a safety hazard, there wasn't much they could do. I researched light pollution laws. Turns out our city didn't have any. I was stuck sleeping in what felt like the interrogation room. The situation escalated over the next year. Tom would mow his lawn at 6 in the morning on weekends. He'd blast music late at night. He'd accidentally hit my fence with his lawn equipment, causing damage. He'd spray weed killer near the fence line, killing the plants I'd planted on my side. Every interaction with him was hostile. I documented everything. Photos of the yard waste, videos of him throwing things over the fence, recordings of the dog barking, light meter readings of the floodlights. I kept a detailed log with dates and times. I wasn't sure what I'd do with this information, but I knew having documentation might be useful. Tom's wife would occasionally apologize to me. She'd say Tom was stressed about work, that he'd calm down eventually, that she was sorry about the inconvenience. I appreciated her kindness, but it didn't change Tom's behavior. If anything, he seemed to get worse. About 18 months into living next to Tom, I decided to install security cameras. I'd had enough of the harassment and wanted clear video evidence of everything. I put cameras on all sides of my house, clearly visible, with signs warning that the property was under surveillance. Tom complained about the cameras. He said I was violating his privacy by recording toward his property. I explained that the cameras were pointed at my property and only incidentally captured the fence line, which was legal. He threatened to sue. I told him to go ahead. The cameras were the best decision I made. They captured Tom throwing rocks at my house. They captured him letting his dog deliberately go to the bathroom right against my fence. They captured him spray painting graffiti on the alley side of my fence. Having video evidence changed everything. I compiled all my documentation and videos and filed for a restraining order based on harassment. The judge reviewed the evidence and granted a temporary order. Tom had to stay away from me and stop the harassing behaviors. He violated it within a week by leaving a threatening note on my car. That violation got him arrested. After spending a night in jail, Tom seemed to finally understand there were consequences to his actions. The harassment stopped. The floodlights came down. The dog got brought inside during the day. The early morning mowing stopped. It was like living next to a completely different person. Tom and I don't speak now. We avoid each other completely. If we're both outside, one of us will go inside. If we pass each other getting mail, we pretend the other doesn't exist. It's not a friendly neighborhood relationship, but it's better than the war it was. His wife still occasionally apologizes. She told me they're planning to move soon, that Tom hates living in a place where everyone knows what happened. By everyone, she means the few neighbors who witnessed some of the conflicts or heard about the restraining order. I feel bad for her, but I don't feel bad about protecting myself. The whole experience taught me a lot about dealing with difficult neighbors. Documentation is everything. Being patient and trying to resolve things peacefully is important, but there's a limit. When someone is clearly harassing you, you have to be willing to involve authorities and take legal action. Being nice and hoping they'll stop doesn't work with people like Tom. I did eventually get a dog, a sweet rescue who loves the fenced yard. Tom hasn't said anything about it. His dog occasionally barks at my dog through the fence, but it's brought inside quickly. Small victories. I love my house. I worked hard to afford it, and I refused to let a bad neighbor drive me out. Some people thought I should just sell and move, but why should I have to leave because someone else is behaving badly? I stayed. I fought back, appropriately, and I won. The house is mine, the fence is staying, and Tom can stay mad about it on his side of the property line. All right, let's move to the next one. My extended family decided to take a group vacation last year. It was supposed to be a week of relaxation, bonding, and making memories. It turned into one of the most stressful, dramatic weeks of my life. Let me walk you through this disaster. The idea started with my Aunt Carol, who thought it would be wonderful for the whole family to spend time together at a beach house. 20 people, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, kids, all under one roof for 7 days. When she first proposed it, some people expressed concerns about whether that many people could coexist peacefully in one house. Carol insisted it would be fine and that we were family and would make it work. Red flag number 1 should have been the house selection process. Carol found a house that technically slept 20 people. By technically, I mean it had beds and couches and air mattresses scattered throughout 5 bedrooms. The sleeping arrangements were going to be tight. Some couples had to share rooms with their kids. Some adults were sleeping on couches. I ended up on an air mattress in a room with 3 cousins. Not exactly the relaxing vacation setup. We all arrived on Saturday. The house was nice enough. Right on the beach, good kitchen, decent common areas. But immediately, problems started. There was 1 bathroom per floor, 3 bathrooms total for 20 people. The morning bathroom situation was a nightmare. People were waiting in line, arguing about shower times, getting frustrated. The kitchen became a battleground. Everyone had different dietary preferences and restrictions. Carol was vegan. Uncle Mike was on keto. Aunt Sarah's kids were picky eaters. Grandma needed low-sodium meals. Coordinating meals for 20 people with all these different needs was impossible. We tried taking turns cooking, but every meal turned into a negotiation about what to make that everyone could or would eat. By day 2, people were already getting on each other's nerves. The kids were loud and running around constantly. The adults were trying to relax but couldn't because of the noise. Some people wanted to do activities as a group. Others wanted alone time. There was no privacy anywhere in the house. Day 3 brought the first major argument. Someone ate someone else's clearly labeled food from the fridge. It sounds petty, but when you're one of 20 people sharing limited space and resources, every boundary violation feels bigger. The argument about the missing food escalated into a discussion about respect and consideration, with people taking sides and bringing up old family grievances. The beach itself was the one saving grace, except that coordinating 20 people to go to the beach together was like herding cats. Some people wanted to go early, some wanted to wait until later, some wanted to stay all day, some wanted to come back for lunch. We'd finally get everyone down to the beach, and immediately people would start saying they needed to go back for something they forgot. Day 4 was the infamous dinner incident. We'd planned to have a nice family dinner at the house. Carol volunteered to cook a vegan meal for everyone. Several family members were skeptical, but went along with it to keep the peace. Carol made a cashew-based pasta dish that was not good. I'm sure some vegan food is delicious, but this was not it. The kids refused to eat it. Uncle Mike complained that it wasn't keto-friendly. Grandma said she'd just eat bread. Carol got offended that people weren't appreciating her effort. She said everyone was being closed-minded about vegan food. Uncle Mike said she'd offered to cook for everyone, knowing their dietary restrictions, and then made something that only she could eat. The argument got heated. Carol ended up in tears, saying nobody appreciated her. Half the family ended up ordering pizza, while Carol locked herself in her room. Day 5 brought the worst incident. 2 of the teenage cousins were caught sneaking alcohol from the adults' supply. Their parents were furious. One set of parents blamed the other set for not watching their kids closely enough. That turned into an argument about parenting styles. Other family members got involved, taking sides. The argument lasted hours and resulted in 2 families packing up and leaving early. With 6 people gone, the house felt slightly less crowded, but the mood was completely ruined. The remaining families were walking on eggshells, trying not to cause more conflict. Every small thing, someone leaving dishes in the sink, someone playing music too loud, someone taking too long in the bathroom, felt like it might spark another fight. Day 6, it rained. 20 people stuck inside a beach house with nothing to do, and tensions already high. Kids were bored and acting out. Adults were irritable. Someone suggested watching a movie together, but we spent 45 minutes arguing about what to watch and eventually gave up. Different groups scattered to different rooms, essentially avoiding each other. So much for family bonding. The final day, Sunday, everyone was packing and trying to leave as quickly as possible. There was a checkout checklist of cleaning tasks that needed to be completed. Of course, some families started leaving without doing their share of the cleaning. The remaining people had to clean up after 20 people, which took hours and made everyone late for their drives home. The drive home, I got a group text from Carol. She was upset that the vacation hadn't gone as planned and was blaming everyone else for not trying hard enough to make it work. Several family members responded with their own versions of what went wrong. The text thread turned into another argument, digital this time. I muted the conversation and ignored it. In the weeks after the vacation, family relationships were strained. The 2 families who'd left early weren't talking to the families they'd fought with. Carol was hurt that people weren't thanking her for organizing the trip. People were sharing competing narratives about whose fault the disasters were. It was a mess. We had a family gathering a few months later for a birthday. It was awkward. People were polite, but distant. The vacation that was supposed to bring us together had actually driven us apart. Some relationships have recovered since then, but others are still damaged. Looking back, the problem wasn't that we're a bad family or that anyone was particularly terrible. The problem was poor planning and unrealistic expectations. 20 people in one house for a week is too many. People need space, privacy, and independence on vacation. Trying to coordinate everyone's schedules, preferences, and needs was impossible and stressful for everyone involved. If Carol wants to plan another family vacation, and I hope she doesn't, I'll politely decline. I love my family, but I love them more when I see them in small doses and have the option to leave when I need space. Family vacations should be relaxing, and this was anything but. Some lessons you learn the hard way, and this was definitely one of them. Let's get into the next story. I once had a job interview that was so bizarre and uncomfortable that I walked out halfway through. I've had bad interviews before, Unprepared interviewers, awkward questions, weird vibes. But this one topped them all. Here's what happened. I'd applied for a marketing position at a mid-sized tech company. The job description looked great. Good salary range, interesting projects, room for growth. I got called in for an interview and showed up professional, prepared, and excited about the opportunity. The first red flag was the waiting area. I arrived 10 minutes early, as you should, and told the receptionist I was there for an interview. She looked confused and said she didn't have me on the schedule. I showed her the email confirmation with the date, time, and interviewer's name. She made some calls and eventually confirmed that yes, I had an interview, but nobody had told her about it. Not a great start, but mistakes happen. I waited in the lobby for 30 minutes past my scheduled interview time. No apology, no explanation, just sitting there watching employees walk by. Finally, someone came to get me. A young guy who introduced himself as Brad from HR. He led me to a conference room and said my interviewer would be there soon. Another 15 minutes passed. I sat alone in the conference room, wondering if I should just leave. Finally, 3 people walked in, 2 men and a woman. They didn't introduce themselves. They just sat down, opened their laptops, and one of the men said, "So tell us about yourself." I launched into my standard interview intro, talking about my background, my skills, my experience. All 3 interviewers were looking at their laptops, clearly not paying attention. One was definitely checking email. Another seemed to be shopping online. The woman was the only one occasionally glancing up at me. I finished my introduction, and there was silence. Finally, the woman asked me a question. If you were a kitchen appliance, what would you be and why? I'd heard about these weird creative questions in interviews, so I tried to give a thoughtful answer. I said maybe a mixer, because I'm good at bringing different elements together to create something cohesive. It was a decent answer to a weird question. One of the men looked up from his laptop and said, "Wrong. That's a terrible answer." I asked what would have been a better answer. He said there was no right answer, but mine was definitely wrong. I didn't know how to respond to that. The woman looked embarrassed but didn't say anything. The questions got weirder. They asked me to rate my attractiveness on a scale of 1 to 10. They asked if I was planning to have kids in the next 5 years. They asked what my biggest weakness was, and when I gave the standard "I'm a perfectionist" answer, one of the men laughed and said everyone says that, and it's fake. I agreed that it was a bit of a cliché answer and tried to give a more genuine weakness. He cut me off and said he didn't actually care. They asked me to solve a math problem on the whiteboard. The problem had nothing to do with marketing. It was some complex equation that I barely remembered from high school. I tried my best, got it wrong, and they made comments about how they were surprised I couldn't do simple math. The problem was definitely not simple. Then they asked me about salary expectations. I gave the range I was looking for, which was in line with what their job posting had indicated. One of the men said, "That's pretty high for someone with your experience." I pointed out that my experience matched what they'd asked for in the posting. He said the posting was more of a guideline, and they'd probably want to start me lower. This was going poorly, but I still hadn't reached the breaking point. The breaking point came when they asked me to perform a task. They wanted me to pitch them a fake marketing campaign for a product they'd come up with on the spot, an app that matched people with trees that reflected their personality. They gave me 30 seconds to prepare and then demanded I present. I tried to come up with something coherent in 30 seconds, stumbled through a pitch about connecting people with nature and environmental awareness. They interrupted me constantly, calling my ideas stupid and unoriginal. When I finished, one of the men said, "That was the worst pitch I've ever heard. Are you sure you work in marketing?" The others laughed. That's when I'd had enough. I stood up, thanked them for their time, and said I didn't think this position was the right fit for me. One of them looked surprised and asked if I was leaving. I said yes. This interview process had been unprofessional, and I wasn't interested in working for a company that treated candidates this way. The woman looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. As I walked out, I could hear them laughing behind me. Brad from HR tried to stop me in the lobby, asking if everything was okay. I told him honestly that the interview had been disrespectful and inappropriate, and that I was withdrawing my application. He seemed genuinely confused, like he didn't understand what could have gone wrong. I left the building feeling angry and humiliated, but also relieved that I'd walked out. I kept second-guessing myself. Should I have stayed? Was I being too sensitive? But the more I thought about it, the more certain I was that I'd made the right choice. The way they'd conducted that interview said everything about their company culture. I left a review on Glassdoor describing the interview experience. I kept it factual and professional, just outlined what had happened without exaggerating. Within a few weeks, other reviews appeared from other candidates, describing similar experiences. Turned out this company had a pattern of conducting hostile, inappropriate interviews. Some people theorized it was some kind of stress test to see how candidates handled adversity. Others thought the interviewers were just jerks who enjoyed making candidates uncomfortable. A few months later, I saw the same job posting again. They were still looking for someone to fill that position. I wasn't surprised. Who would accept a job after an interview like that? I eventually found a great job at a different company. The interview there was professional, respectful, and actually relevant to the position. They asked thoughtful questions, listened to my answers, and treated me like a qualified professional. The difference was night and day. That experience taught me that how a company treats you during the interview process is a huge indicator of how they'll treat you as an employee. If they're disrespectful and unprofessional during the interview, it's only going to get worse once you're hired. I don't regret walking out of that interview. In fact, it's one of the times I'm most proud of standing up for myself. Everyone has a limit, and recognizing when you've reached it and acting accordingly is important. You don't have to tolerate disrespect just because you need a job. There are other opportunities out there, hopefully with companies that value their employees. Let's move to the next story. My friend Jake decided he was going to propose to his girlfriend of 3 years. He wanted it to be special, memorable, romantic, everything you'd expect from a proposal. What he planned was elaborate. What actually happened was a comedy of errors that somehow still ended with them getting engaged. Jake's girlfriend, Melissa, had always talked about how she wanted a proposal at sunset on a beach. Pretty standard romantic fantasy. Jake took this seriously and planned an entire surprise beach weekend. He booked a fancy beach resort, arranged for a photographer to hide nearby and capture the moment, even hired a violinist to play romantic music during the proposal. He'd spent months planning every detail. The weekend arrived. Jake told Melissa they were just going for a casual beach getaway. She packed light, thinking it was a relaxed trip. Jake had secretly packed the engagement ring, a change of nice clothes for both of them, and had coordinated with the resort staff to have everything ready for the big moment on Saturday evening at sunset. Friday night at the resort went fine. They had dinner, walked on the beach, enjoyed the ocean view from their room. Jake was nervous, but keeping it together. The proposal was planned for the next evening, so he had time to prepare mentally. Saturday morning, disaster number 1 struck. Jake woke up with food poisoning. Bad food poisoning. He spent most of the morning in the bathroom, feeling absolutely miserable. Melissa wanted to take him to a doctor. Jake insisted he'd be fine, that he probably just ate something that didn't agree with him. He couldn't go to a doctor because that would mess up the proposal timing. By afternoon, Jake felt slightly better, still not great, but functional. He convinced Melissa to walk on the beach with him later, saying fresh air would help him feel better. She agreed, but suggested he rest more first. Jake rested, took medication, and prayed he'd be recovered enough by sunset. 6 o'clock rolled around, time to get ready for the proposal. Jake put on his nice outfit. Melissa was confused about why he was dressing up for a beach walk, but went along with it. Jake had hidden a nice dress in their luggage and suggested Melissa wear it, because they might stop at a nice restaurant after. She was suspicious now, but changed into the dress. They headed to the beach. The photographer was in position, hidden behind some rocks. The violinist was waiting at the designated spot. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon. Everything was set. Then Jake realized he'd left the ring in the hotel room safe. Panic. Jake tried to play it cool, suggesting they go back to the room quickly for something. Melissa asked what. Jake made up a lie about forgetting his phone. Melissa pointed out his phone was in his pocket. Jake then said he needed to use the bathroom. Melissa, concerned about his food poisoning, said they should just go back to the room and skip the beach walk. Jake had to think fast. He convinced Melissa to wait on the beach for him, said he'd be right back, and literally ran back to the hotel. The photographer saw him running and looked confused. The violinist just stood there with his violin, wondering what was happening. Jake grabbed the ring, ran back to the beach, and arrived out of breath and sweating. Melissa asked if he was okay. He obviously wasn't. He looked like he'd just run a marathon. But sunset was happening now, and the photographer and violinist were waiting. Jake decided to push through. He got down on one knee, right there on the beach, breathing heavily and sweating profusely. He started his prepared speech. "Melissa, from the moment I met you, I knew." And then he threw up, right there, mid-proposal. Food poisoning wasn't done with him yet. Melissa screamed and jumped back. Other beachgoers turned to look. The violinist stopped playing. The photographer kept shooting because what else was he going to do? Jake finished throwing up, wiped his mouth with his hand, and tried to continue. I'm sorry. What I meant to say is..." He pulled out the ring box, opened it, and the ring fell out into the sand. Of course it did, because nothing about this proposal was going according to plan. Jake and Melissa both dropped to their knees searching for the ring in the sand. The sun was setting, light was fading, and they were frantically digging through sand looking for an engagement ring. The violinist, bless him, started playing again, trying to maintain some romantic atmosphere while two people dug through sand like desperate treasure hunters. Melissa found the ring. She held it up triumphantly, covered in sand. Jake, still on his knees, still recovering from throwing up, looked at her and just said, "Will you marry me?" No fancy speech, no romantic moment, just a simple question from a man who clearly was having the worst day ever. Melissa started laughing. Not polite laughter, full-on hysterical laughter. She was laughing so hard she had tears running down her face. Jake wasn't sure if this was good or bad. She finally calmed down enough to say yes. Yes, she would marry him, even though this was the most disastrous proposal she'd ever witnessed. They hugged, both covered in sand, Jake still looking green from food poisoning. The photographer captured it all. Every terrible, wonderful moment. The violinist finished his song. A few other beachgoers who'd been watching applauded, though probably more out of relief that the chaos had ended than out of congratulations. Jake and Melissa went back to the hotel room. Jake spent the rest of the night recovering from food poisoning. Melissa called her family to share the news, describing the proposal in detail. Everyone thought she was exaggerating about how badly it had gone until Jake posted some of the photos on social media. The photos showed everything: Jake looking sick, the moment he threw up, both of them digging in the sand, the final hug where they both looked absolutely exhausted. The photos went semi-viral among their friend group. Jake became known as the guy with the worst proposal ever. But here's the thing. Melissa loves telling the story. She says it's uniquely theirs, that it's funny and memorable and perfectly represents their relationship. They can laugh about it together, which is apparently what matters. They got married last year. At the wedding, Melissa's maid of honor showed some of the proposal photos during her speech. Everyone laughed. Jake stood up and took a bow. He's learned to embrace the story rather than be embarrassed by it. Melissa says she wouldn't change anything about how it happened, which is either very romantic or evidence that she has a great sense of humor about life's unpredictable moments. The lesson here is that perfect plans rarely work out perfectly. Jake spent months planning an Instagram-worthy proposal and ended up with a disaster. But it didn't matter because Melissa said yes anyway. The proposal isn't what makes a marriage work, it's everything that comes after. Though Jake says if they have kids, and those kids want advice on proposing someday, he has a detailed list of what not to do. All right, let's jump into the next one. I almost got sucked into a multi-level marketing scheme a few years ago. I say almost because I figured out what it was, just in time to extract myself before losing too much money. But the experience was eye-opening and frustrating, and I want to share it as a warning to others. It started with a message from an old high school acquaintance. We hadn't talked in probably 5 years, but suddenly she was reaching out all friendly, asking how I'd been, what I was up to. I thought it was nice that she wanted to reconnect. We chatted for a bit about life, jobs, mutual friends. Then she mentioned she'd started a business and was looking for motivated people to join her team. Red flag, but I didn't recognize it yet. She said it was a health and wellness company, that she was making great money, and that I'd be perfect for it. I was working a regular job at the time, but always open to side income. I agreed to hear more about it. She invited me to a business presentation at a local hotel conference room. I showed up thinking it would be a small meeting, maybe her explaining the company and the opportunity. Instead, it was about 40 people in a conference room, all sitting in rows facing a presenter at the front. The energy was weird, overly enthusiastic, almost cult-like. The presenter spent an hour talking about how amazing this company was, how much money people were making, how this was a ground floor opportunity to achieve financial freedom. They showed charts with income potential. They showed testimonials from people who'd supposedly quit their jobs and now made 6 figures. They talked about exotic trips the company gave away to top performers. It all sounded too good to be true, which should have been my second red flag. The company sold nutritional supplements, vitamins, protein powders, weight loss shakes, that kind of thing. The products themselves seemed fine, though overpriced. But the real pitch wasn't about selling products. It was about recruiting others to sell products. You'd make money not just from your sales, but from the sales of everyone you recruited, and everyone they recruited, and so on. A pyramid structure, though they insisted it wasn't a pyramid scheme. At the end of the presentation, they asked who was ready to sign up. People actually rushed to the front to pay the startup fee, $300 for a business kit that included some product samples and marketing materials. My friend was pressuring me to sign up right then, saying the opportunity wouldn't last forever. I said I needed time to think about it. Over the next week, my friend messaged me constantly. She sent me more information about the company, more income testimonials, more pressure to join. She said I was missing out, that people who joined early made the most money, that I should trust her because we'd known each other for years. I was close to signing up just to get her to stop messaging me. I decided to do some research first. I Googled the company name, plus scam, and reviews. I found thousands of complaints. People who'd spent thousands of dollars on inventory they couldn't sell. People who'd alienated friends and family by constantly trying to recruit them. People who'd made almost no money despite working full-time hours. People who'd been promised trips and bonuses that never materialized. The company had been sued multiple times for operating as a pyramid scheme. I also found income disclosure statements that the company was legally required to publish. The average participant made less than $200 per year. Per year, the vast majority of people, like 99%, made essentially nothing. The only people making real money were the ones at the very top who'd gotten in years ago and had massive downlines. Armed with this information, I told my friend I wasn't interested. She got defensive, said those reviews were from lazy people who didn't work hard enough, said the income disclosure didn't reflect the real opportunity because most people didn't treat it seriously, said I was letting fear hold me back from success. I stood my ground and declined. She unfriended me on social media. Apparently, if you're not willing to join her downline, you're not worth staying friends with. That hurt, but also confirmed I'd made the right decision. A few months later, I saw her posting constantly on social media about the business. Every post was about the products, recruiting, Motivational quotes about being a boss babe and achieving dreams. She'd obviously been told to use social media as a recruiting tool. Her posts got almost no engagement, and the comments she did get were mostly from other people in the same MLM doing the same thing. About a year after our conversation, I saw through mutual friends that she'd quit the MLM. She'd apparently spent over $5,000 on inventory, trips to company conventions, and marketing materials. She'd made back maybe $500 total. She'd alienated most of her friends by constantly trying to recruit them or sell to them. She was embarrassed and refusing to talk about the whole experience. This pattern is common with MLMs. They prey on people looking for financial independence, stay-at-home parents looking for income, people in tough financial situations looking for solutions. They promise easy money and flexible hours. They use cult-like tactics to keep people invested. Constant positive reinforcement, love bombing, making people feel special and part of an exclusive group. The reality is that MLMs are designed so that the vast majority of participants lose money. The people at the top make money by recruiting, not by selling products. The products are often overpriced and average quality. The business opportunity is really just paying for the chance to sell products and recruit others, with most people failing to make any meaningful income. I'm glad I researched before signing up. $300 isn't a huge loss, but it would have been just the beginning. Once you're in, they pressure you to buy more inventory, attend expensive training events, purchase marketing materials. People get in thousands of dollars deep before they realize they're not going to make that money back. If someone from your past suddenly reaches out being super friendly and then mentions a business opportunity, be suspicious. If a company's primary focus is on recruiting rather than selling products, run away. If income potentials presented with vague promises of wealth rather than realistic numbers, it's probably too good to be true. And always Google the company name plus scam before signing up for anything. MLMs are still legal and still operating, which is frustrating. They destroy relationships, drain bank accounts, and leave people feeling like failures because they couldn't make a fundamentally flawed system work. I wish I could say my friend was an isolated case, but I've seen it happen to multiple people. Be careful out there, and don't let anyone pressure you into a financial decision you're not comfortable with. Let's move on to the next story. I travel fairly regularly for work, and I've been through airport security hundreds of times. It's usually a boring, predictable process. But about 2 years ago, I had a security experience that was so absurd and frustrating that I'm still annoyed thinking about it. I was flying out early on a Monday morning for a work conference. I got to the airport with plenty of time, checked my bag, and headed to security. I was wearing standard travel clothes, jeans, a t-shirt, sneakers, nothing unusual. I put my laptop and liquids in separate bins, took off my shoes and belt, walked through the scanner. Standard procedure. The scanner beeped. The TSA agent asked me to step aside for additional screening. This happened sometimes randomly, so I wasn't concerned. They did the hand swab test for explosives. It came back positive. Again, this happens occasionally as a false positive. But instead of just doing a pat-down and sending me through, the agent called over a supervisor. The supervisor looked at the test results and got very serious. She asked me to step into a private screening room. I asked what was going on. She said they'd detected traces of explosive materials and needed to do a thorough check. I was confused, but complied. What choice did I have? In the private screening room, 2 agents did an extremely thorough pat-down. They went through every item in my carry-on bag. They swabbed everything. They asked me questions about where I'd been, what I'd touched, why I might have explosive residue on me. I had no answers. I'd woken up at home, showered, gotten dressed in clean clothes, and come to the airport. I hadn't been anywhere near explosives. The swabs kept coming back positive. Multiple items in my bag, my shoes, my belt, even my phone all showed traces of explosive materials. The agents were getting more concerned. They asked if I worked with chemicals or explosives. I said no. I work in marketing. They asked if I'd been to a shooting range recently. No. They asked if I'd been around fireworks. No. They asked if anyone else had access to my bag. Just me. At this point, I'd been in the screening room for over 30 minutes. My flight was boarding. I asked if I could just throw away whatever was causing the problem and catch my flight. They said it wasn't that simple. If I had explosive residue, they needed to figure out why. I was starting to panic about missing my flight and also worried about being accused of something serious. They brought in another supervisor. This person looked at all the test results and started asking me about my morning routine. What did I eat for breakfast? What did I touch? What products did I use? I walked through my entire morning, woke up, showered, used shampoo and soap, got dressed, put on deodorant, grabbed my bag, and left. Nothing unusual. Then the supervisor asked what kind of deodorant I used. I told her the brand. She looked it up on her phone and her face changed. Apparently, the specific deodorant I'd used that morning contained glycerin, which can cause false positives on explosive detection swabs. This was a known issue, but not all TSA agents were aware of it. So I'd been detained for 45 minutes, missed my flight, and gone through intensive questioning because of my deodorant. I was relieved that it was resolved, but also furious that this much time had been wasted over something that should have been easily identifiable. I asked if I could now proceed to my gate. They said no, I'd missed my flight. I'd need to go to the ticket counter and get rebooked. I asked if they could provide any kind of documentation explaining the delay. They said they could note it in their system, but couldn't give me anything official. Great. I gathered my belongings and went to the ticket counter. I explained what had happened and asked to be rebooked on the next flight. The gate agent was sympathetic, but said the next available flight wasn't until 5 hours later. I asked if the airline could do anything since the delay was due to airport security, not anything I did wrong. She said unfortunately the airline wasn't responsible for security delays. I called my boss to explain why I was missing the first day of the conference. Tried to explain the deodorant situation. It sounded ridiculous, even as I was saying it. My boss was understanding, but also probably thought I was making up an elaborate excuse. I spent the next 5 hours in the airport. I bought new deodorant from an airport shop, a different brand that hopefully wouldn't cause explosive detection issues. I threw away the offending deodorant in case it caused problems on my return flight. When I finally boarded my rebooked flight, I was exhausted and frustrated. The whole experience had been absurd. I understand airport security needs to be thorough, especially when tests show positive for explosives, but it seems like there should be a database of common products that cause false positives so agents can quickly identify and rule out these situations. The return flight home was uneventful, thankfully. My new deodorant didn't set off any alarms, but now every time I travel, I'm paranoid about what products might cause issues. I research every toiletry item I pack. I avoid certain brands and ingredients. It's added a whole new level of stress to traveling. I tried to file a complaint with TSA about the incident. The complaint process is Byzantine and essentially led nowhere. I got a generic response acknowledging my experience and explaining that security procedures are necessary for safety. No apology, no acknowledgement that 45 minutes was excessive for a deodorant issue, nothing. The whole experience made me realize how little power passengers have in airport security situations. You can be detained indefinitely, miss flights, and suffer consequences, all because of a false positive that should have been easily resolved. And there's no recourse, no compensation, nothing. You're just supposed to accept that it's all in the name of safety. I still use that airport regularly for work travel. Every single time I go through security, I'm nervous that something random will set off an alarm, and I'll go through the whole ordeal again. It's made travel less enjoyable and more stressful, which is unfortunate because I used to actually like the travel aspect of my job. The lesson from this, I guess, is to be careful what products you use before traveling. Research common causes of false positives on explosive detection equipment. Give yourself even more time at the airport than you think you need. and maybe carry documentation about any products you're using that might cause issues, though I'm not sure how much that would actually help. Also, be patient with TSA agents. Most of them are just doing their jobs and following protocols. It's not their fault the protocols sometimes lead to absurd situations. Direct your frustration at the system, not the individuals. Though I'll admit, I wasn't feeling particularly charitable toward the TSA agents after spending 45 minutes in a screening room because of my deodorant. All right, let's get into the next one. I'm going to tell you about my coworker Martin, who I worked with for 3 years, before discovering he had a secret life that none of us knew about. Martin worked in our IT department, and he was about as stereotypical IT guy as you could imagine. Quiet, kept to himself, ate lunch alone while reading, rarely participated in office social events. He was good at his job, but completely unremarkable otherwise. The company decided to do a team building event at a local comedy club. It wasn't mandatory, but most people showed up because free drinks and entertainment. Martin was there, which surprised some people since he usually skipped these things. We all sat together at a big table near the back. The comedy show was fine, a few local comedians doing their sets, some funny, some not. Then the host announced they were doing an open mic portion where audience members could come up and try stand-up. A few drunk people stumbled up and told terrible jokes. Everyone was politely laughing, but it was awkward. Then Martin stood up and walked to the stage. We were all confused. Martin was volunteering to do stand-up comedy. The guy who barely spoke in meetings was going to tell jokes in front of a crowd. This was going to be painful to watch. Martin got on stage, adjusted the microphone, and launched into a comedy set. And he was good, really good. He had timing, presence, confidence. His jokes were clever and well written. He did observational humor about tech support, about dealing with people who don't understand computers, about office life. Everyone at our table was sitting there with their mouths open, completely shocked. He performed for about 10 minutes, killed it the entire time. The audience loved him. When he finished, he got a huge round of applause. He thanked everyone, walked off stage, came back to our table, and sat down like nothing had happened. Just casually returned to his seat and took a sip of his drink. We bombarded him with questions. How long had he been doing comedy? Where did he perform? Why didn't anyone know about this? Martin explained that he'd been doing stand-up for about 5 years. He performed at open mics around the city regularly, had done some small paid gigs. He'd never mentioned it at work because he liked keeping his professional and personal lives separate. Someone asked why he'd decided to perform tonight if he usually kept it secret. Martin shrugged and said the opportunity presented itself, and he figured why not. Plus, he had new material he wanted to test. He'd literally used us as an audience for his work-in-progress jokes. The next day at work, Martin was suddenly a minor celebrity. People who'd never spoken to him before were stopping by his desk asking about comedy. He handled the attention with the same quiet demeanor he had for everything else, answering questions briefly and then getting back to work. After a few days, the excitement died down and Martin went back to being just the IT guy who ate lunch alone. But I started following his comedy career after that. He had a small social media presence under a stage name. He performed regularly at local clubs. He'd actually been featured in a local comedy festival. He wasn't famous or anything, but he had a legitimate second career that he'd kept completely hidden from everyone at work. About 6 months after the team building event, Martin left the company. Not for another IT job. He'd gotten an opportunity to tour with a more established comedian as an opener. He was going to try doing comedy full-time for a while. We threw him a going-away party, and he performed a short set, making fun of all of us and the office. It was hilarious and surprisingly personal, given how much distance he usually kept. I've followed Martin's career since then through social media. He's been steadily building his comedy following. He's performed at bigger venues, been on a few podcasts, released a comedy album. He's not a household name, but he's making a living doing what he loves, which is more than a lot of people can say. The whole experience made me think about how little we really know about our coworkers. We spend 40 hours a week with these people, see them more than our own families sometimes, and yet we often have no idea what their lives are like outside the office. Martin had this entire rich, creative life that nobody knew about because he chose not to share it, and that was his right. It also made me realize that the quiet, unremarkable people might be the most interesting ones. The people who are constantly talking about themselves and their accomplishments might actually be less impressive than the people who quietly excel at things without needing recognition. Martin didn't need validation from coworkers. He didn't need us to know he was funny. He knew it, and that was enough for him. I wonder how many other Martins are out there. People with hidden talents, secret passions, entire lives that exist completely separately from their day jobs. The artist who works as an accountant, the novelist who works as a paralegal, the musician who works in retail. People who clock in, do their jobs competently, and clock out to pursue what really matters to them. Society puts a lot of pressure on us to be our whole selves at work, to bring our passions into our careers, to find jobs that fulfill us completely. But maybe Martin had it right. Maybe it's okay to have work be just work, and to save your energy and creativity for something completely separate. Maybe that separation is actually healthier than trying to find meaning and identity in your job. I don't know if Martin would agree with my philosophical takeaway from his comedy career. He might just say he liked telling jokes and needed a day job to pay bills. But watching someone I'd written off as boring turn out to be incredibly talented made me reconsider a lot of assumptions I'd made about people based on their professional personas. If you're someone with a hidden talent or passion, keep doing it. You don't owe anyone an explanation or performance of who you are outside of work. And if you're someone like I was, assuming you know people based on limited interactions, maybe consider that everyone has depth you're not seeing. We're all more complex than we appear in professional settings. And that's it for this video. Thank you for listening.